Thursday, March 13th, 2014, the Springboro Board of Education meeting. Roll call.
Anderson?
Here.
Malone?
Here.
Stuckey?
Here.
Regano? Petroni?
And Mr. Regano and Mr. Petroni will be here. They're just going to be late. And we have the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 1.2, the adoption of the agenda. Remove the adopted agenda.
Second.
Mr. President, I would like to make an amendment to the agenda. Somehow this week, the retiree hire for classified that was discussed in our last board meeting was not placed on the HR report under section 4.2. We would like to add that for your approval.
Okay, so that'll be added. And then we'd like to omit item 9.3 in the work session. Mr. Regano. So is there roll call?
You mean 10.3?
I thought it was 9. Oh, 10.3, I'm sorry.
The coaching contract?
Yes. 10.3.
Vote. Anderson?
Yes.
Malone?
Yes.
Stuckey?
Yes. Yep.
Sorry, Regano?
This is on the modification to the
Yes,
agenda?
it's
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
All right, motion passes. Item 1.3, approval of the February 27, 2014 meeting minutes. Is there a motion? So moved. Second.
Second.
Question, discussion?
Sorry, I'm trying to add.
I'm sorry, take your time.
I'm sorry.
Roll call. Oh, Mr. Stuckey, Mr. Moore.
Sorry, I'm
Second.
trying to add. Okay. Anderson?
Yes.
Malone?
Yes.
Regano?
Yes.
Stuckey?
Yes. Motion passes. Item 2.1, Springboro Education Association report. Is there a report?
I'm here, no report.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Item 2.2, Springboro Classified Employees Association report. Any such report? Okay. 2.3, public participation. Let me read for those of you who've never attended a board meeting perhaps. The Board of Education will now open the floor for public comment during our public participation session of this Board of Education meeting. Remember that your comments must adhere to board policy 0169.1. This means that the entire public participation session may last to a maximum of 30 minutes. Each person speaking shall be limited to a maximum of 5 minutes. It is expected that all public comment during the public participation session must be related to the board work session agenda items. Individuals speaking shall not direct any of their specific comments at Board of Education employees. By this, I mean by referring to the employee by their name or their position. As board president, I reserve the right to interrupt warn or terminate a participant's statement when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. What we'll do is we'll give the speaker 5 minutes, and Ms. Boyd, if she would let them know when 4 minutes are up so that they can wrap it up. If, unless anybody has any objection, I know the board policy was written this way, but I think it should just, when people submit their name to speak, I think they should be allowed to speak about whatever they want. It doesn't necessarily have to be a board agenda item, so.
Mr. Anderson, I was going to raise the point of order on that. I think the statement that was prepared this afternoon is actually incorrect. It's been the longstanding practice of the board that when people prearrange to speak at this business session, that has been open to any topic that's relevant to the Board of Education, not confined to the work session agenda. However, at the work session, which we hold after this meeting, or after this portion of the meeting, there's another time for people to participate. And so the line here about agenda items really pertains to that work session agenda. Because, you know, if we were to only let people talk about the agenda items that we're talking about here in this business meeting, we're ready to vote on those. And there's really not much opportunity to impact those decisions at this point. So we provided that second opportunity at the work session agenda so that people can hear those items as they're being discussed in work session. And then they have a chance, as the board's considering those things, they have the opportunity to also consider those things and then provide feedback before the items come forward to the board in a future meeting. So that's the way that it was laid out. The statement as it's been prepared for you is really not reflective of what the board's practice and policy is intended to be. As I looked into this statement and why it was created, there's a typo in the board bylaws here, and it refers to the work session portion of the agenda twice. But it's been the practice. In fact, it's actually been the practice that even at this business session, even though it's not part of the board's bylaws, that we have allowed people, even in the business session, to talk about the items that were on the business session agenda. But it's been a long-standing practice of the board that we would let people come and talk about things that even aren't on the agenda if they chose to prearrange. Let us know they're coming in advance, 72 hours in advance, and as long as it was a matter of relevance to the board that they could talk on that.
Well, I don't think there's any argument from any of the board members, because I think at least the spirit of it should have been that you can come and talk about whatever it is.
And
So,
policy
Mr.
committee,
Yeah.
we will section that out where it's very clear, prearranged, anything can be discussed.
You could easily understand.
We'll do it,
Not all
absolutely.
big words. Okay, so we have a speaker, I believe, Dr. Cole.
Okay, thank you, board. I have a couple things I'd like to mention tonight, and I won't take 5 minutes. Oh, Kelly Coles,
Yep.
7141 Fort Worth Drive.
Thank you.
Okay, Springboro community and parents must be involved in the decision to participate in the federal Common Core standards and in the federal standardized tests called PARC. We should all fully understand what PARC is before we force children to take it. The side effects to taking these tests multiple times per year in almost every grade involve taking this test anxiety, wasted education days, using district resources simply to use our kids as guinea pigs to a federal test consortium. I want to remind all of you that Ohioans, including educators, were not involved in writing these standards, nor the curriculum, nor the tests. How do we make up education days? Now 11 days in total, essentially 11 days in total, of education have been canceled due to snow or cold this year. You want also to waive 4 more days for professional development. And then more days out of education to run these pilot tests as a favor, I think, to the federal government. And I think that's going to start at the end of this month. why are we using our kids and our resources to test when this park test is likely to be discontinued? There is legislation in front of the House right now to discontinue the park requirement and have other testing opportunities available for our students. I'm not sure it's worth a wasted day of education, given that you're going to present tonight that our third graders lost about 10 percentage points, right, in progress. Many of our similar districts did lose also, but only 2 districts lost more than 10%. 2 districts, though, out of our 19 similar districts actually gained progress in third grade. So I think we have at least that deficiency we need to address. So I'd rather see more education days, or some of the education days made up for, rather than piloting a test that is probably going to be discontinued very shortly. Parents have the right to understand who wrote these tests, why it is being tested in Springboro, and what are the advantages and disadvantages. Hundreds of data points taken from children to track parents and children by the federal government. The test banks are also data banks housing enormous data from our students about them and their families, likely to be used later in the application of healthcare services. As you all well know, I object to the use of 4 more education days to be waived in exchange for professional development. Last December, I refused to sign that waiver, and I understand you were frustrated, but I remain concerned about the education in Springboro, even though we have a number of students here tonight who worked hard and who progressed and who were definitely successful. We still have our remedial rates last year, the year before, went up 5%. That means 5% more of our students that graduate from high school do not meet the minimum competencies to get into college. The total now is 1 in 5 of our students do not meet the minimum competencies to get into college without the need to take remedial math or English. We have educational concerns, at least those 2 that I mentioned, third grade and high school graduates. I think we need to use our days more effectively than piloting a test that's probably going to be discontinued. And if teachers must be very concerned that their evaluations will be 50% based on student achievement and yearly progress, yet they have to teach this content with essentially 3 weeks less time to teach it. Taxpayer paid for these days, and children deserve these days. If these professional days, the 4 days you're asking to get a waiver on, are important, and I believe they must be, let me suggest an obvious solution. Request all employees that need this PD attend 4 days in the summer. Make the 4 days of the essentially 11 that they were already paid for but canceled available to them to use in this way. If a district employee does not show for this important professional development and their progress towards student achievement is subpar, you may suggest that their participation or lack thereof may be the reason, however. You can make participation in professional development voluntary. Those that do not show choose to take the chance that they will not progress in their evaluations as shown by reduced student achievement. My last question is, what happens to the rest of the district employees when teachers have these 4 days of PD, with no students attending on those paid days? Will these days be treated like snow days, where all district employees get
It's
paid,
been 5 minutes.
but there is no education taking place?
Dr. Cole, you could,
Is it
there's
4?
5 minutes of that.
It's been 5. I said it
5.
when I came before. I apologize.
Okay. Oh, I
Yeah,
didn't
but-
hear you say
I'm
that.
sorry. I tried.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for your time tonight.
I'll try
Thank
to.
you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much. Item 2.4, any public participation? Speaking on the agenda items. Seeing none, we'll move to 2.5, recognition of high ACT scores.
Sit here.
Mr. Anderson, board members, Ms. Floyd, Mr. Petrie, community members, thanks for the opportunity to come back again to celebrate these students today there are 52 of them who have scored a 30 or better on their ACT between October and February of this year. So hopefully there'll be one more round before we finish the school year. But it's my honor and privilege to introduce them to you this evening. What I'm going to do is read their name, have them come to the front. Mr. Petrie, you want to shake their hand, we're going to take a picture. And then we're gonna go have some fun next door at the reception that I'm offering. And you guys can finish your business. All right, first of all, we have Joel Harris. Christian Seitzman. Angelo Marcello. Brendan Woodall. Daniel Zhu. Ishani Kurzweil. Nicholas Porter. Tyler Nichols. Alexander Watson. Claudia Coffin. Derek Saunier. Emma Morris. Kelly Jenna. Lillian Hare. Madeline Durbin. Nicholas Lewis. Anthony Scott. Andrew Geisel. Andrew Martin. Brenna Wedick. John Brewster. Aaron Bruner. Adam Seabaugh. Jason Stanifer. Julie Kessler. Allison Lee. Neil Connolly. Robert Marusco. Ryan Schroenhammer. Sage Phelps. Taylor Rasmussen. Thomas Marusco. Tyler King. Annabelle Boyce. Ashley Shires. Irene Schumacher. Caroline Kincher. Sheila Lawson. Lynn Hacker. Emily Madison. Nishan Bott. Giovanni Perotino. Jessica Moser. Joel Levis. Justin McKinnon. Catherine Stakowski. Kayla Frieder. And Kayla Schweitzer. Molly Chrisman. And Brad Case. You're competing with the strings concert next door. I wanted to say congratulations to all these young people, and I wanted to make sure that even if they couldn't be here this evening, their names were at least read into the board minutes or the board agenda, what have you, because all of them deserve our round of applause. But there's another group that deserves our round of applause, and it's their parents. So if you're a parent of one of these children, please stand up so we can recognize you as well. thank you for your continued support of our students. We're going to take a picture and then we'll get going.
Stand up and.
Eric Greenwood. Is that right?
Is that good? Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. We're going to go next door to a small reception if you guys want to join us.
Yeah, I know your dad. Francis, your name. Fairly handsome.
Oh yeah, we are. This is happening.
We did Christmas.
All right. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, we'll move on to item 3.1, the treasurer's report.
Just the financial.
As soon as we find it.
No, you can go ahead, it's just the
Oh.
financials.
Approval of the February 2014 financial statements. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Yes, question, any discussion? Roll call?
Anderson,
Yes.
Malone,
Yes.
Petroni,
Yes.
Rodano,
Yes.
Stuckey,
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 4.1, superintendent's report, actually, donation.
Correct. This is approval of donation for $560 from Springboro Baptist Church to assist with lunch fees of students who are on reduced lunch.
Motion?
So moved. Second.
Roll call?
Can we go with
Yes,
discussion?
discussion, go ahead.
I was just curious, it was curious to receive a donation for food service or lunch assistance, I assume it was, right? So I'm assuming that somebody went to the church because they knew somebody or maybe their family needed some assistance with school lunches. I'm assuming that that's what's happened. Is that right, Mr. Petrie?
That's part of it. The other part I really can't talk about because it's the need of a student who is very much in need.
Right. And so, I guess, a couple of questions about it. First of all, I appreciate the donation, and no problem accepting it. But we happen to be sitting on a food service balance that's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so, if there's kids out there that are in need, I guess my question is, can we find out what that need is? And if we need to further subsidize the lunches, I don't know what the cutoff is for reduced lunch versus free lunch. I don't know what those family incomes are, but, you know, the federal government provides a level. But if there's that much need and we have these surplus funds, it seems that we could impose a Springboro level that is maybe a little bit more generous than the federal level, at least during this time when the economy's bad and people are struggling. And so it seems unfortunate that we have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in the food service fund, but we have kids that apparently go hungry and are in serious need, and for whatever reason, I guess, didn't qualify for the free and reduced program. And so that's really my question, is can we take advantage of this large amount of cash that we have on hand? And if, you know, if we have families out there and we need to raise the level so the kids don't go hungry, can we do that?
First and foremost, I wouldn't consider that we have a large amount of cash. It is about $500,000, but we have to consider we have 2 elementaries that were built back in 2006 or 2008. When the equipment tears up, that is the money we're going to use to replace that equipment. $500,000 is not going to go very far with the equipment that it takes to prepare lunches for well over 1,000 kids a day. Second, as I have stated, I'm very much appreciative of Springboro Baptist Church for doing this. We did get our appropriate staff involved on this particular situation, and the donation was deemed in this manner to address the needs of the student. So I wouldn't, first and foremost, they were contacted and they addressed us. And we appreciate the donation, but the needs of the student was met.
And this is apparently just like one family as opposed to a broader need
Again,
out there.
Mr. Agano, the donation is out of the goodness of the church.
Well, I'm not questioning,
which I think is
Mr.
what
Petrie,
churches
do
are all
not
about.
misunderstand. I'm not questioning
Mhm.
the sincerity or the value of the donation whatsoever.
Right.
But we are sitting on a huge pile of cash.
Actually, I would like to just say something about this. When I was going through the rest of our audit yesterday, they had asked us why that we had a reduction of $129,000 this past year in revenue for the food service account as to the previous year before that. And we talked to the food service department and they said it was because of the new implemented lunch menus that a lot of kids don't like it, so they're not eating it. And so we actually have a reduction of $129,000. If that continues forward, that's also going to end up eating into our cash balance. And we'll have those during the post audit. You'll be able to see stuff like that. So that's just something to also think going forward, that will also, if that continues to occur. So that cash
Okay,
balance
but-
won't always
but,
be
I
there.
mean, there's a lot of ifs here. I mean,
Right.
if we need to
I
replace
understand.
equipment that's working today.
Well, that was actually a
and-
fact. The $129,000 is a proven
Okay.
reduction in revenue. I just wanted to put that in
Okay,
there.
and
because
if that were, if that fact were to continue in the first
Right, so
future.
it already happened once.
But,
so.
I mean, and the reality is that kids are going hungry. And,
No one's going
We feed
hungry.
them.
well,
Our
I'm
no
lunch
one's
food,
going
we feed
hungry.
them. Their
apparently,
accounts go into deficit.
apparently there was some reason that they came and pursued this donation. That's my point.
It was their choice.
There was a need that was relayed to the church. Church made a donation, right? I mean, I am not,
We're just
I am
explaining.
not
We're not
attacking
going
this
hungry.
donation. You're acting like I'm objecting to the donation, and I'm not.
That's okay.
I'm not doing that at all. So please don't be defensive.
I'm not being defensive, I'm
The-
simply stating.
I'm asking the
how it's
question though, because we have so much cash, and if there's a continuing need, let's use that cash to meet the need. Because I understand we may have equipment to replace in the future, but we have, 2 years ago, we didn't have maybe 3 years ago, we didn't have this balance. In fact, we were giving money to the food service fund to make them break even. That happened in the not too distant past. We now have on the order of $500,000 in the fund. And meanwhile, we've got apparent need. And I'm just asking, can we use some of these funds to meet the need? That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking.
Well, to me, we have two separate issues here. If the lunch fund in the district has accumulated $500,000, that probably occurred over a period of time due to some decisions that were made, staffing-wise, menu-wise, food-wise. It wasn't like we went from a zero balance to $500,000 in 1 year. And so if we need to look at making some adjustments in our program, that's fine. But to me, that is a separate issue from what we have here. I personally think that something is being made a little more complicated than it needs to be. There is a need which has been brought to the attention of the church. The church has said we are willing to meet this need. They have donated the money, and to me, that's honestly at the end of the story. That's where it ought to end. They have offered a donation here. I feel we ought to accept it with gratitude and move on. If we have to look at our food service program, I assume we're talking about equipment and so forth, that there's some kind of a equipment rotation replacement cycle that's set up. You know, how soon are we going to have to draw on these funds? But to me, we have two separate issues here. We're trying to, in a way, combine them. And I just see them as two separate issues.
And I would agree, and I'm not being defensive. I almost feel like the defense is coming towards me. I mean, we have told the community since I've been superintendent here, we are going to be very conservative in the way that we deal with our money. It's a great thing we have $500,000 in there, but we've discussed this, we've discussed school fees. When we start having balances, we just can't run and spend them because there is going to be a time we need to replace these things. And we save that money and bank it until that time comes. But as far as this particular issue, it did go to pay for some of the students' fees. And it also did go to help one student in particular, and that I am not at liberty to discuss. And I don't understand why I'm being asked to discuss.
No, you're not being asked to discuss the student's issue. I'm repeating myself. But the connection between the issues is there was one student that had a need. There may be more. Okay, I don't know that. One came forward. One came forward not to us, but to a church. If there are more needs, we should try to address those because I think that we have the means to address those and meet our other obligations as well. That's simply my point.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be ungrateful at all to the church for stepping in and solving the problem, but I'm suggesting that there may be more problems and that we have the means to address those. Today, we're fortunate to do that. And, so that's my
I think
point.
we're all in agreement. We appreciate that. I'm sure there was a connection between the person and the church, and I think they stepped up, and I think it's a great thing, and it shows the community of Springboro. So with that, let's call for a vote.
Anderson?
Yes.
Malone?
Yes.
Petroni?
Yes.
Regano?
Yes.
Stuckey?
Yes.
Motion passes. And
4.2.
4.2.
It is approval of a donation from Springboro Athletic Boosters for $45,619.88. This is going to go towards the replacement of our weightlifting equipment in the high school facilities. And this will be open to all students from all sports.
Motion?
So moved.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Anderson?
Yes.
Malone?
Yes.
Petroni?
Yes.
Regano?
Yes.
Stuckey?
Yes.
Item 5.1, approval of personnel items. Mr. Benson?
Good evening. On behalf of the superintendent, I bring the following items for board approval this evening. Items 1 through 4 are both classified resignation and 3 classified substitute positions. And then we have items 5 through 32. Those are all supplemental personnel and supplemental personnel for hire. And finally, we have the item 33, which is to employ a head mechanic. That was brought to your attention the last board meeting and work session. So those items are on board to be approved for this evening.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Mr. Regano, second. Roll call? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Discussion.
Yeah, Ms. Vincent, all of these were offered to school employees first before they were put out to people who are not employees. And then the classified union in particular had, I should say, some folks who are classified folks, had relayed to me that they would like to be part or have the opportunity to participate in competing for some of these supplemental positions. Are these being offered in such a way that they're eligible to apply for those as well?
I believe they were all posted, but I would have to look at the specifics of the positions right now. That was the understanding as we went forward earlier this year. I would need some time to double check that.
I think you're referencing athletics, and when some of our games to where we have workers, some of the workers have been asked that have done it in the past, and they weren't open to the employees, that have been addressed.
Thank you.
I don't think any of those are on this particular report.
Any other discussion? Roll call?
Anderson,
Yes.
Malone,
Yes.
Petroni,
Yeah.
Regano,
Yes.
Stuckey,
Yes.
Motion passes. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Spencer.
We'll move to item 6.1, Business Manager's Report, approval of the junior high Washington DC trip contract.
One quick question. You added the other item to the agenda. Should it go here or did you add about the, should be 5.2, which is the retiree hire for classified staff?
I think I said 4.2, and the amendment is 5.2, and that is for the retired, rehired staff.
So what we would need is an action from the board to authorize the superintendent to enter into an agreement with the classified union to create a memorandum of understanding for a procedure to do retire, rehire for classified staff members. It's really a need, especially for our bus drivers. We're really short on bus drivers, and this would help tremendously to get some quality folks back in our roles that we need to be able to do to maintain our bus fleet.
And this was discussed in work session at the last board meeting.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Any discussion?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just what I don't recall any discussion about what, understanding the benefit to the access, I guess, for qualified drivers, stating that there's short supply is what you, I believe, represented. What's the other side of the benefit to the district besides having qualified drivers? Is there any other benefit that comes to the district?
The biggest benefit we have is the fact that we've got a bunch of drivers that have retired from here before and are willing to come back and drive full-time for us. And a lot of them are driving part-time for us as substitutes. But then they want to come back, and, the intent is to bring them back at the step zero, to the bottom. And, we have a full-time driver, ones that we can rely on. They'll go through the interview process just like anyone else does. We're just having a really hard time getting people in, getting trained, and get them on the buses before we lose our drivers.
Well, quite frankly, it holds us up on our kids taking field trips. We're not able to approve field trips because we can't get enough drivers to cover the routes and do the field trips.
And this will be exacerbated in the spring, once baseball and there starts, because a lot of trips are going out before school's over, and we're going to be really short on drivers. Both our mechanics and our transportation supervisor have driven routes this year because we didn't have enough people to cover the routes.
I guess as you go into any memorandum of understanding, there has to be give and take on both sides.
Correct.
And I'm just trying to think of newspaper articles on other statements that were made in other districts, who people were hired and rehired, where certain benefits were foregone or
Correct.
certain other things. I'm not trying to bring that up in a way other than just reading the newspapers. I'm not suggesting that here, just things that I've read in the newspaper as benefits that I guess were that the district
Right.
received.
And that's why we'll be entering into a memorandum of understanding with the union, restricting those benefits and certain things that are within the contract that they would not have access to. There are certain things that by law you have to do. If they're an employee, full-time employee, you have to give them sick days, you have to give them personal days. Those are things you're required by law to do if they become a full-time employee. But there are other things you don't have to do that are within the contract, and that's what this MOU will restrict.
Or at least you'll be able to talk about it.
Correct.
I have one more question, I'm sorry. So when we talk about qualifications, is it something that we do a regular search for drivers? And the only context I have, and this is last year when we met with first student and Peterman. And I don't recall, we had a couple hour meetings with both in Budget and Finance, went over their strategy and how they would, if they implement their services, where sometimes they usually try to keep all the drivers that are here. And I don't recall them saying there was a supply-demand issue at all with regards to drivers. I mean, how do we manage,
Well,
how do we manage it?
one of the things that's making the supply demand hard for us is because our sub rate is so low. Our sub rate is one of the lowest in the area, so we could train a lot of drivers and then they go to car lot, and we go to freight because their rates are higher. And then, so we end up with a lot of folks who don't hang around as long as we could because our sub pay is not as high, so.
It's okay, thank you.
We did raise the sub rate last year.
Correct, we did. And it's more competitive, it's still not there, but we have gotten sub-drivers.
It is an alternative to raise it so that it is competitive. Because we thought we were raising it to a competitive level. But if we didn't get the sub rate there, maybe we need to do that. Here's my misgiving about the retiree hire. Because I know if we do it for classified, that's, the certified is gonna look the same, but, right? And so, one, we would set the precedent. Number two is that we're in a pretty bad economy. And when we rehire somebody who's retired, we're really denying somebody the opportunity to take that job. Now, if we're not getting the applicants, I guess that's a different story, and I understand that's what you're telling us is the case. But what I would like to see in this memorandum of understanding, or at least the agreement, maybe the board resolution tonight, I assume you pass it, is that we post these jobs for like 60 days, and we really exhaust we make an exhaustive attempt to hire somebody who needs a job. And then if we exhaust it, say it was posted for 60 days in the public, and we don't get anybody qualified, then, we can do the hire and retire. Is that something that you would find agreeable?
Sure, it's posted on our website on an ongoing basis.
You're right.
Also, we ran 2 ads in the paper this year, and we've got 10 applicants in those 2 ads. Of those 10 applicants, 6 of them were qualified enough to move through the training, and we've got 4 left at this moment. So we have tried. I mean, it's not an easy thing, but we're trying, and that's why this is just another tool for us to try to keep everybody involved.
So, I mean, given that it sounds like you're already doing what I'm asking, you wouldn't object if I proposed an amendment here that said we'll post it for 60 days. That can end up in the memorandum of understanding, and then it kind of solves my precedent question. And I think it also meets your need that
I
hire
don't have any
folks.
problem with that because it's something that we do on a regular basis.
Yeah, we pretty much leave the post.
Correct.
To me, the 60 days seems like an extraordinarily long period of time. That's a third of the school year. And if we post it for 60 days, then are we saying that we're not going to do any activity until the posting comes down? I'm sorry?
Calendar days. 2 months. 2 months.
Well, I just see that as unnecessarily delaying the process. If we need drivers, I don't want to have us wait 2 months to fill it because of a posting deadline like that. And I guess part of it also is, I may not share the same philosophy about retiree hires as other board members do. I think there are very many advantages to the concept of retiree hires. I'm not automatically opposed to it, and I don't automatically believe that it prevents young, working individuals from getting jobs. I think that's a simplistic approach toward it. But anyway, that's more than what we're talking about here. But I personally do not like 60 days. I think that's too long.
I have a question, what is the length of time to train a driver until they're ready to go out?
It typically takes somewhere between 6 weeks and 8 weeks, depending on how good they are. Because first they have to go through most of them don't come to us with a CDL. So first thing we have to do is get them to get a CDL. And then we have to provide them the training that will allow us to do that. So it's a 6 to 8 week process to get a brand new person in and trained for a bus driver.
So you invest 8 weeks in somebody, and then because of our wage, we're not competitive, and then in week 10 perhaps they leave to go get $3 or $4 more dollars.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
Follow up. This MOU, would it be exclusive to bus drivers, or are we also talking about mechanics, food service, and all of the other classified positions?
But we need to, and quite frankly, we've retired teachers in the past year. So, I mean, that's nothing new. What we're looking for is the best employees. And the nice thing about Springboro, some of the employees we have hired in the past are still the best. So it is very difficult, especially we're looking at busing right now because it is the absolute area. It is very tough. And when our buses don't run and our kids are late, they're losing instructional time. It's very difficult to find bus drivers. And it is, even with the $3 increase last year, which we're still, just using Carlisle, for example, we're still $3 away from them. So when you get into Centerville and some of those places, they like that we train these people, but, and we pay for it. And then they leave here and go there and save them money. So it is something that we need to look at for certain. But right now we do have a pretty solid group, but we need to hire a couple bus drivers.
Yeah, one question with spring coming up and the need, you have some retiree hires, you can get them going for the spring here.
So there's a motion on the floor. Mr. Gano,
I'd like to make a move for an amendment that we allow classified, I guess I'm not sure what the original motion was. The original motion was,
Retire and rehire for classified staff.
The original motion is to authorize the superintendent to enter into an agreement with the classified staff for a rehire, retire, and memorandum of understanding.
right, and I would add the language to that, provided that such agreement stipulates that a posting will be publicized for 45 days prior to awarding the job.
But that does then go back to Dr. Malone's question, because if we need a driver, and let's say we're short on 3 drivers, we're not going to be able to wait 45 days to hire someone.
What Mr. Pennell said was that he continually posts for bus drivers.
Mhm.
So the 60-day or 45-day requirement, you've already had it.
Mhm.
So it doesn't affect that, but for, I guess, a mechanic or one of the other positions, where I think that I think we should have the open competition for those jobs with other folks.
Oh, we do.
I think this provides that, it's just an insurance to make sure that we advertise those jobs and that if somebody's interested, that we give them an opportunity before we hire somebody who's already, taken a retirement and basically is, the retirement hopefully is helping them sustain themselves and somebody may need the job. So did,
There's a motion on the floor, and you'd like to add that amendment. I think Ms. Floyd has the amendment.
Okay,
We'll
so-
first vote on the amendment.
We'll vote on the amendment. Well, we have a move to make the amendment. We have to have a
Yes.
second to move.
I assume, Mr. Brownell, are you going to make a motion to?
that's
the
my
amendment?
that's my motion.
Okay.
Well, I'll second it. I need to qualify sorry for this, I just want to make sure that our primary motion is that we're authorizing the superintendent to bring back to the board a memorandum of understanding for approval, not to authorize the superintendent to negotiate that. I assume we're going to see I assume the intent is for you to bring it back to the board to sign off on or not sign off on. That's what makes it valid, but that's not what I heard the motion to be.
Typically, the MOUs are the superintendent has the authority by the board to sign a memorandum of understanding in his power. I mean, I'm just saying.
I believe the motion empowers the superintendent to act on behalf of the board.
Correct.
To negotiate the agreement, but he wouldn't have the authority to ultimately approve the agreement, because that would require board action to amend the contract that the board has with the union.
That's what I'm clarifying. That's what I'm trying to clarify. I'm okay with the authority to go forth and prosper, but I think it's a contractual agreement because we're amending the base negotiated agreement between the classified union and the Board of Education. So I think procedurally, it may have to.
So we can bring it back, but by the time we bring it back, get everything approved, school year will probably be over, but we're more than happy to bring it back.
I'm
We
just
haven't-
asking about procedure. That's all I'm asking about. That's all I'm
It's
asking.
it's different from district to district. An MOU can be approved by the superintendent. You can give discretion to me to do that.
So this motion gives you that discretion.
Correct.
Okay. So we have a vote, we have a motion, an amendment on the floor. We have a roll call and a vote on the amendment?
Anderson,
No.
Petroni, or Malone,
No.
Petroni,
Yes.
Regano,
Yes.
Stuckey,
No.
Motion fails. So we'll go back to the original motion, which,
which was moved by Stuckey and seconded by Malone.
yes,
The
can
roll
you
call.
read that motion?
I don't have the verbiage for the
For
actual
the
motion.
memorandum that.
John,
Mr.
It
Canary
wasn't part of
stated.
the, sorry.
It's the Board of Education is authorizing the superintendent to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the classified union for a retiree hire situation.
So then I can do the roll call now.
Yes.
Okay, Anderson,
Yes.
Malone,
Yes.
Petroni,
No.
Regano,
No.
Stuckey.
Yes.
Okay, motion approved. And is there anything else, Mr.? Yes,
I'm next.
the Washington, that's right, the Washington DC trip.
Now we're on to something hopefully a little bit easier.
Yeah.
This, in front of you today is the approval for the junior high Washington DC trip contract. And there was concerns at the work session that we needed to do some more research on it. I was in contact with the teacher at Green Middle School, which is in Smithville, Ohio, about 100 miles from here. So, and he was gracious enough to send me the literature that he had gotten and everything. He unfortunately, he's a drama teacher also, so last week was getting ready for drama, so he got it to me this week. In addition, I contacted 4 other companies to get their rates, and I actually faxed them a copy of our itinerary with the name of the company removed so that they didn't see who it was, so we could get some ongoing rates. A couple things about this. Number one, the Green Middle School, they typically take about 240 students per exam. So theirs is a little bit bigger, which gets them a little bit better rate. Plus, they're 100 miles closer to DC, so there's 200 less miles round trip. If you notice on the Classic Student Tours, which is a local company that we've been dealing with for 25 years, It's about $515, that's the low cost. We put more kids on the bus for 180 students. Greenville School this year, they paid $410 per student to go. They had 2 less meals paid for. One of the meals they packed with them and ate on the way. So that's another reason why theirs is a little bit lower. The other thing that there's a couple places that they don't go to the Holocaust Museum, nor do they take a stop at the Capitol. So that's 2 things that are really different on their tour that's different from ours. Of the other websites, Go Education, it was $442 a student. Capital Tours was $535. Great Adventure Tours was $550, and DC Field Trips was $540. So when you look at it, the classic student tours, it's not the cheapest, but it's also it's a local company that we've been dealing with for 20-some years, and it's good to keep the money in the local community.
Well, we can trust them with our
You
kids.
know what you're getting when you get it.
Exactly.
Did anybody have any questions?
Is there a motion on the floor? Second.
Second.
Mr. Petroni. Discussion?
Yeah, just, well, one comment, it's not really a question for you, but a comment, I guess. You know, I think there's something to be said for us making sure periodically that we are getting the most tour for our money, as well as any other product that our district has that we sign contracts for. But I also am not one that automatically looks at the bottom line. I think that you pointed out that we've worked with this company, and I have no idea anything about the company. But our junior high has worked with this company for 22 years, that's what I heard you say. There's something to be said for that. Obviously, we know them, we trust them. And so often, I've seen situations where another company can come in and lowball a price and get the contract, but then a year or so down the road, things aren't working so well, they raise their prices and service isn't there. And so all things being equal, I certainly support staying with a company that we know and we trust.
Any other comments?
Well, thank you, Mr. Pennell, for responding to my question. And it came up because Mrs. Cool, who, left the board in January of last year, she had a student, a stepdaughter, that went on a very similar trip. In fact, she described it as the same trip, and for $100 less. And so it raised the question, and I appreciate you looking at it. I think you've done a great job of explaining what the difference between their trip was and what our trip was. And you've obviously made the assessment that, it's worth the extra money that we're paying. So I appreciate your.
Thank you. Roll call?
Anderson?
Yes.
Malone?
Yes.
Petroni?
Yes.
Pagano?
Yes.
Stuckey?
Yes.
Item 7.1, board comments, reports, or questions. Mr. Stuckey, do you have any comments?
It just was nice to see all those ACT students and looking forward to the next batch that get brought before us.
Mr. Petroni?
I apologize for being late. I just wanted to make sure that 10.3 was pulled off the agenda.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that.
Yes, sir.
My apologies again for being late.
Mr. Rihanna?
We started off the meeting with public participation and a statement. I just want us to be careful about those things, because if the board wants to change its public participation rules, that's the board's prerogative. But there is a process to go through for doing that. And at 3:30 this afternoon, an email shows up saying that the process has changed, and or that the rules for public participation had changed. And of course, that's not going through a process. And, you know, a couple of things that are the board's prerogative, certainly the bylaws. I mean, those are the rules by which the board operates. You make those rules, there's a process for changing them. And the board's policies are the board's rules too. And so we can't just go and change those on the spur of the moment. There's a process. It involves bringing change forward, having a first reading, having a second reading, and the board having a vote. And so I just want to be sure that we're going to follow that policy and consider changes to our bylaws and to our policies. So thank you.
Dr. Bloom?
I'd just like to piggyback on what Mr. Stuckey said, congratulating the young people on the ACT scores. And I mean, it's been a while since I've been directly involved in that, but I just hope that everyone appreciates the achievement that these kids earned. I believe that if you have a 30 on ACT, that puts you in like the top 5% of students nationally. And when you think that 50 students from Springboro High School, that's a tremendous percentage of our kids have achieved this. And a 30, there are no absolute guarantees, but a 30 on ACT is your ticket to a lot of schools, and it's also your ticket to a lot of financial aid. And that's very important, I think, to everybody. And I certainly, I want to congratulate the students on this. I want to congratulate their parents. And I think it's also important that we congratulate the teachers, because if you have all three working to achieve something, this is what happens. And if you have one of those three missing, then the students are not going to be as successful. So again, thank you.
Okay. My only comment is maybe just to clarify to make sure that I myself probably didn't fully understand the public participation as well as I should have. So when Mr. Petrie asked the attorney's office to just clarify that. So, and I have what they wrote, and number 4 is participation must be related to the board work session agenda, and that's why I didn't understand as well. But I don't think any, as I said, nobody here wants to limit anybody's availability to speak on whatever subject they like. So maybe we need to go back and just make sure legally that's clarified, because I think we want it broader. So I think
correct.
And Petrie's going to do that.
Right, and the email today will inform you of our attorney's opinion. We did actually have a community member question, and when it came to our attention, we did meet with our attorney and asked them to read that, because we both read it and agreed with the community member. However, I don't believe policy should be used as an I gotcha moment or discipline by any means, so we will go back and do that. But I did call Dr. Coles today because I did not want to come to the microphone tonight and us start having this conversation and look like it was something she was doing, because she wasn't. That is her right to do that. So in short, based on our attorney's opinion of that, all public participation, prearranged or not, should have to be on a work item agenda. So that is something that the board, and I'm glad you chose to do that tonight, did uphold what's been done in the past the week before.
And I think anybody that does come before the board, if they put their name in and they want to speak to something, I think all of us should respect that. And I don't know that, and I don't know what's been done in the past, so I don't think we're here to rebuttal whatever anybody that comes, because otherwise everybody's going to be afraid to come and speak their mind. So I just encourage all of us to just be open-minded, let people say what's on their heart or their mind, and as long as it's respectful, it's great. So
Just one more point on that. I mean, the board's bylaws are not, while it can get into the legal realm, the board's bylaws are the board's rules. And it's not really something that requires a legal interpretation. Something like public participation is entirely up to the board. We could have nothing, or we can have a very liberal policy. Ours is pretty liberal, frankly. We give people, at least on the agenda, free opportunities to come and speak. But those are the board's rules, and it's not in my view, it's not really for our attorney to interpret that. You know, if we were into legalities, for example, we had a question early on about the oath of office. Well, that's a legal code that says what the oath of office should be. Our attorney is appropriately consulted on those kinds of things. But for other things where it's not a legal issue, there really are decisions. And so if we need an interpretation of the bylaws or something like that, it's the five of us that have that responsibility to make those interpretations. That's all I have to say.
Aren't we just talking about a typo?
It is, yeah.
Basically, a 2.5 versus 3.5, because as I've been speaking since 2010, and I wasn't on the board then, I know that there was a lot of opportunity. I mean, I spoke on prearranged on any topic we wanted to speak on at the time, and I sorry, again, missed the debate, but I listening to you, it sounds like we're not gonna change that practice. We're gonna let the public come in and have an opportunity to talk, and we'll fix the typo. I thought it was a policy too, that you have the ability, Mr. Petrie, to fix a typo.
Well, quite frankly, I'm just going to be perfectly honest, it's contentious when we bring up a discussion. And I don't like when our public sees our board meetings that we have all these debates and people telling us it's filled with negativity. When I'm advising the five of you, both of us wanted to have a legal opinion for you to go from. Otherwise, it would turn into a debate of who's right, who is wrong, and that's the last thing I want to see of the five people who have been elected by this community around the community. So, quite frankly, that is why we got an opinion from our attorney, was to give you a basis to go from.
And we're all in agreement, right?
I guess can you fix the typo?
We can. And actually, the policy needs adjusted where it's very specific about what prearranged is, what public participation is in business section, and what public participation is in work session. The policies have to be written to where people who aren't experts in policy can understand them. And that's what we've been told, even with our staff, is these are made to where we follow them. They have to be written in a manner as such, and that's what we'll do in our committee.
Moving on to item 8.1, any announcements, public announcements?
I do have one. Actually, you'll see all of the board members received these this evening, and Dr. Wood, I apologize, I stole the little note from our preschool kids so I could read what these are. During the March powwow this week, we focused on the Panther Promise of Trust, and that is an initiative they have in their building, Positive Behavior Supports. The students and staff wanted to show the trust we put in all of you to lead our district. We appreciate the role each of you play in making Springboro Community Schools a great place to learn. Sincerely, the students and staff of Clear Creek Elementary. So this is a little gift to each of you to show their appreciation for the hard work you put in and get paid very little to do and spend a whole lot of time doing it. And I think we all need to give you a thank you. There you go, Dr. Mullins.
Thank you.
Thank you to the students too.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Future consideration, item 9.1, any future consideration, any board members? With that, item 10, we'll convene for a work session. Yeah, let's take 5 minutes. We're gonna stay right.
Yes, committee report. Are you able to hear me, Mr. Worthing? You hear me? The policy committee did meet. We are right now reviewing numerous policies. Hopefully, at the next board meeting, we will have some for first reading. As far as budget and finance goes, we meet tomorrow. All of the committee information is on the superintendent's page. The public, all of our committees are open to the public. Tomorrow we do meet with budget and finance. And Mr. Pinnell will be there to talk about the capital needs budget. We'll be talking a little bit about our zero-based budget and how we've actually increased that this year in the buildings from last year. And Ms. Floyd will be discussing the revenue inspections and so on and so forth. So the other committees, we are in the process. Tonight we'll actually start one of our committees, the Public Relations Committee team. The evaluation committee, we actually had that one set based on our contract. We were supposed to meet with the union to discuss performance-based pay. Unfortunately, that was a day that we had a snow day, so we are in the process of reorganizing that meeting as well. So as we have these meetings, we'll bring that information to you.
Is it a place to, I'm sorry, Mr. We're usually less formal here. I don't know process you're comfortable with. In policy, since we talked about a thing in policy, is that something we should refer down for some immediate action as it relates to, is that how that works, or what's, I don't know what the new procedure is. I know before the board members, if there was an issue that they would refer it down to committee, so I don't know what the process is, but that could speed up the public fixing that.
Any policy you have a question about, even as we bring those to you, if we have policies in place that you are uncomfortable with, I would suggest speaking with Mr. Anderson and referring those to myself. We'll get them out there, and/or during the board meetings. At this point, the board meeting can tell us at that time as well, because you are right, the policies are yours, and it's my job to carry those out and to make sure those get changed and the recommendations brought to you.
I guess I'm asking, since we're all 5 here, is this a place and time we want to put the public participation policy back in for a quick review? Or are they going to sit somewhere out there with questions? That's all I'm asking. It sounds like there's questions in it, so that maybe we can fix it.
Or was it just a typo?
I'm hoping that's what it is. If that's what it is,
It is a typo, but I think we are going to take that to committee and try to section it out a little bit.
that's what I wasn't sure of. If it's a typo, then I have nothing else to say. We can fix it. I heard Mr. Petrie had mentioned there's other things he wanted to put up.
Well, I think you're gonna take it to the committee and then just get it looked at, get the typo fixed, and get any other language. In my opinion, makes it simpler and easier to understand.
I just was asking to direct it to the next meeting, so it'd be something to be in the process versus, because I think you've got a few policies that are probably lined up that I would like it not to be at the bottom of the pool, so I'll suggest if that's okay with everybody.
It is.
Sure.
We have. Oh, you are, okay.
One other thing about the policies, you know, that normally you have a first reading and a second reading. If you all feel very compelled that this is something you want to get done quickly, you can waive the 2 meetings and do that in a quick 1 meeting thing, have your first reading and your second reading in the same meeting if you'd like. So if this is, you know, if that's something that is important, we can get the changes made as soon as we can, get it back to you, and then you can just have 1 meeting. You just waive the first reading and you go automatically go to second.
Because quite frankly, there aren't going to be major changes to it other than rearrange. Here it is, public participation, boom, boom.
A couple things. One, I mean, the typos, our bylaws do give the superintendent the authority to fix the typos. He's supposed to bring those back to the policy committee, and the committee should agree that, yeah, it was only a typo, so that it kind of closes that loop for things that are, you know, this one is a clear typo. It should be a 2.5 instead of a 3.5 in one place. But, you know, sometimes the typos are, you know, maybe a little bit broader. So the superintendent has the authority to do that. He's supposed to bring those back to the policy committee for, you know, basically confirmation that, yeah, it was a clerical change. As far as changing the policies, there is a policy on changing the policies, and I would just refer you to that. That's what stipulates that there's 2 readings, and it also stipulates a procedure for an emergency, but I don't believe that there's a provision that, at least in our bylaws, that would allow us to avoid the 2 readings.
Well, the typo is understandable. You wrote a lot of it, so the typo is very understandable, but there were a lot of people that read it that did not catch it.
Yeah, well, actually, Mr. Petrie, I did catch it a long time ago, and I asked that it be corrected. It's one of 2 things: either the correction didn't happen, or it's in this big long Neola queue that we never seem to be able to get through.
Correct.
So, I did notice that it was typed, and of course, you know, when we find those things, we can bring it to your appropriate
I
person's
mean, as you know,
attention.
I'm not always at the committee meetings, and a lot of that just went straight to action. So, we will get it correct, and the committee will be there to talk
All
about
right.
it.
So, any other comments or discussion? None on that. All right, item 10.2.
Yes.
Mission and Vision Project Presentation.
Man, I'm gonna leave my microphone off. Will it interfere with this one? Or leave it on, I should say, I apologize.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Board President, board members. Tonight we are going to be discussing, and actually I'd like to introduce a couple guests who will be presenting with me this evening to discuss our proposal for our community engagement and setting the beliefs, mission, and vision of the district. It's our intent to develop this for the future of our school district. And the guests, first and foremost, are our public relations person, Mrs. Karen DeRosa, and also our private facilitator, Mr. Jeff Steck. Before they speak, I did want to go ahead and lay the groundwork for the plan itself. What we are really trying to accomplish is to engage our community in a discussion about the future of academics in Springboro. We are a $50 million organization, and unbelievably, we do not have a current vision. We've researched this, and in the past 15 to 20 years of looking, we've never truly had a vision of where we want to go in the future instead of living basically in the day. When we look back at how the community has been brought together to have discussions, two areas have been discussed. One is school levies, and number two has been building new buildings. And you can see that from back in 2006. In short, what we're looking at as we develop a mission, vision, and beliefs is where we are going to be 10 years from now. Where do we want Springboro to be 10 years from now? Over the past year and a half, we have had a lot of conflict. There's been discussions of which direction is the district going? Do we need college or career courses? All of those discussions have been about the here and now. And quite frankly, the absence of vision is a lot of the reason we have had all of those debates and controversy. When we look at college or career and the jobs that we're trying to prepare kids for, we put those into a high school course of study, those jobs may be obsolete in 10 years. That's why we're not looking at specific things, but rather what's going to propel the education to move kids forward 10 years out. It's the skills that we're developing in the kid. When we look at the beliefs, vision, and mission, what is the purpose of this? The purpose of this is to articulate a district identity and a shared culture. Why is that important? Well, first and foremost, our vision has to represent the beliefs of our community. And you can transition to the next slide. When we think beliefs, beliefs are not, we will be excellent with distinction. Or perhaps, we will provide professional development to teachers. Those are not beliefs. A belief is something, for example, fostering critical thinking amongst all learners, or fostering cultural competence amongst all learners. Those beliefs have to align with what our community believes. That allows us at the district level to then develop a vision that will propel us into the future. These are the beliefs that's going to drive things, not the classes we offer for jobs or the particular calculus class, but the fundamental educational beliefs that we foster in our kids. And you know, it's just not about academics. This is about developing our kids to be productive citizens, to give back to their community, to give back to their country. That is part of vision. Lastly, we look at the mission. The mission is who we are and what we will do today. That is the broad scale spectrum of all that we're going to accomplish. When we look at these, quite frankly, one of the most important is vision. State minimums can no longer be our vision. We live in a community of upper scale students, majority middle class, upper middle class. Their parents are preparing them for college. State minimums of being excellent with distinction, to where 75% of our kids pass 40 to 60% of the test. That is the minimum for a place like Springboro. The vision is where we're going to go. That is what needs to be focused on. We have strategic plans from the past. As a matter of fact, I worked on one of those. Those are 5-year plans. We have district goals based on real-time data that my staff and I put together through the use of the Ohio improvement process. The more that we're able to define the vision based on the community's beliefs, the easier it is for us to deliver an education that meets those beliefs. Education as a whole has fallen short because it's been left up to the experts within the district, which we are. But we've ran off and left the people paying for this and not ever asking what they really want out of us. That is what this process is going to do. We deliver a level of education and a vision based on the beliefs of what this community stands for. How are we going to do that? Actually, 3 different teams. First and foremost will be our public relation communication team. That will be our core team, made up of about 10 people. That team will continue on after this is done so that we can continue to work on our public relations. We will also have a stewards team made up of 30 to 35 people. And this evening, Board of Education members, I have a list of those people so far that have been recruited. And the reason I'm giving that to you, and anyone else that would like to have that, we'll publicize those as we go on. That is a very diverse group of community members. I've discussed this with the staff. In the past 2 times that committees have been put together to develop strategic plans, what has happened is of the 100 people, and Karen is going to talk about this, of the 100 people who were involved, over 80% were staff members, with only 20% community. In this process, from that paper, you're going to find, I would say close to 90% will be community members. Different political affiliations, different ages. Some have kids in the district, some don't. But the bottom line is we're all going to come together in a controlled manner, correct? And we are going to define the vision of this district based on the diversity of this community. And then finally, that will take place over numerous community meetings. And when we have community meetings, everyone is going to be invited. It's not going to be by invitations. The stewards will be there, the core team people will be there, I will be there. But the goal is to get the community in. Now, some people might say, well, Mr. Petrie, no one's going to come to the meetings. You know, that might be the case. But we've spent a lot of time looking at our stewards team that will be able to work through some of these things in a diverse manner as well. But I'm confident that in this particular realm of things, we are going to get a lot of community members here. And Karen is here now to talk a little bit more in depth about some of those.
Before we move forward with connecting with the community in a new way, we wanted to look back at what had already been accomplished, what sort of strategic plans had been done in the past, and what community outreach and engagement had meant in recent memory. We went back and we looked and found 3 sort of seminal events or efforts in the last 15 to 20 years. So working backwards from today, the first one we find is in 2006. So that's 8 years ago that we had any sort of strategic planning effort here in the district. And it really is different from what we're proposing tonight. What happened coming out of the 2006 plan, the key thing that I think many of us see every day when we're in the building is you see those big white signs that have the mission statement on there. That mission statement came out of that 2006 plan. But as Todd already said, that steering committee was limited to about 30, and the outreach was limited to about 100 people, and the majority of those people were staff and administration. I don't want to say that was a bad thing, because what came out of that were objectives that had to do with their day-to-day jobs. They set objectives including 100% graduation rate, 100% proficiency on OAAs, 6 strategic goals, and under those there were 47 action plans and 277 steps, and just saying all that makes me exhausted. Yeah. That's not the process that we're talking about here. That is the day-to-day work of this district. That's meeting federal and state mandates. That's seeing what's coming down the road and saying, these are the things we have to accomplish today, in this month, in this year, and in 3 to 5 years. So that's really addressing the present-day business of being a school. And that's what they were doing in 2006. Would you mind being there, Deanna? That's okay. Going back then a couple more years into history, we have the Schoolhouse and Quality Project. And I remember this. I had moved to the district in 2003, and I attended a couple of these meetings. This was with Steve Hamden Hall Architects. They were noted, still are, but they were really noted at that time. Yeah, the clickers, I see you guys remembering going to those meetings. They had large community meetings, and they had some survey data. They did a wonderful job with it. But the specific purpose of that was looking at facilities. It was about buildings. It was about, again, what we needed to address immediate issues of population in the district, and not looking long range. So while it was very successful in reaching a number of community members and in outreach, the goal was different than what we're talking about here. And then if we go back again to the 2001 strategic plan, and this strategic plan began the 5-year process that was renewed in 2006 and started with 7 subcommittees, 151 action steps. Slackers, they were only half as busy now. it was a much smaller effort, right? But it was still 151 action steps. When I've talked to people that were on both of those committees, 2001 and 2006, there's not a lot of data from that except their final reports. So what came out of that were those day-to-day, what do we need to accomplish to meet our immediate goals as educators in this district? So it makes sense that those efforts didn't reach out into the community to the level that Todd and I are speaking about proposing to you here tonight. All right, little game for you. What do you guys see when you look at that picture? Some of you see a face. Some of you might see a woman walking away toward a bridge. And some of you, now that I've told you the two images that might jump out, are now your eyes are playing. You can play with your eyes and you can go back and forth between those two images. Now that you know there are different ways of looking at things. As someone who works on your communications, I confront this every single day. A message that I think will be, I'll post something on Facebook and I'll think this thing's gonna fly. We're gonna get 1,000 hits on this in the first couple of minutes. And I go back an hour later and it's got 200, nobody's even looked at it. And then something I think that's going nowhere. I'm just posting it to be, polite, or it's time to post something else, and I think, gosh, I don't know how far this is gonna go, but I'll go back an hour later and we're at 4,000 hits and it's been reposted 15 times. And so you don't always know how your message is going to be received, in part because the meaning is in the receiver, not in the communicator. Let's look at the next slide. This brings it a little closer to home. Is Andrea here? All right. This is the very first day of online dual enrollment learning at our high school in January. Just showing that picture, I know evokes different responses from everyone who sees it. When I posted it on Facebook within an hour of taking that picture, within a minute, I think a mom here in our community liked it and shared it and said, oh my gosh, here's my daughter. I'm so excited she gets to have this opportunity. And it was exciting to watch that response. But I know that that's not the response that everyone has. A lot of people look at that and say, is the learning as effective? A lot of people are looking at the technology. A lot of people want to know about the curriculum. There's a lot of issues surrounding everything we do here in the district. And again, every message we put out there is received differently based on who is receiving that message. All right, let's look. Last game I'm playing with you. What do you see now? Anyone want to count the triangles for me? Nobody's gonna bite. When? David, 8. I see Pac-Man, but I'm a child of the 80s. Yeah, I see Pac-Man. I don't, right, there's no triangles. That white triangle is something our minds create for us in that image. So my point here, and forgive me, I'm the communication professor, so I do this in my classes. My point here is when you receive a new message, you invest your meaning in it, your perspective, your life experiences, the lens through which you see the world. We invest meaning in these messages. That's what's happening now with our district communications. Coming out of 2009, 2010, district-wide communications were really suspended in terms of any large-scale communication effort. And then in 2011, 2012, we brought district-wide communications back, but in a very limited way, with a regular sort of every couple of weeks to 3 weeks newsletter. And that was distributed electronically. And with that, some news releases, but it was a very modest, gradual re-implementation of district-wide communication. Up until that point, it was based within the buildings, and the principals were the leaders of just their communication with just their building, and that worked, but not from a district identity perspective. The next year, we escalated that. District communications averaged just about every week, and this year, district communications is multiple times a day. And I think we've taken great steps with that as a team moving forward with our communications, but here's now what I see. I see district communications and conversations over here, and I see community conversations continuing over here, and I think it is a natural next step for us to put those together in the same room. So that brings us to this idea of community engagement over 3 phases, looking at beliefs, vision for the future, and missions, starting in small groups and then building out from there. I do feel as though it is a natural next step in our communications, but also in our goal for transparency and bringing the community into the day-to-day discussions and dialogue we have here at school. Our goal, my goal, Todd's goal is at least 1,000 unique voices. If we ended up with 10,000, that's fantastic. It'll be a big report to write, but There is no limit on participation, and that to me is the single biggest difference with these previous strategic planning efforts that happened 2001, Stadium and Paul, and 2006, and that those were very limited groups. There is no limit on this, none at all. We will hold as many meetings. If we sense that we need bigger rooms, we will get bigger rooms. If we sense that we need more meetings, we will have more meetings. And I will say, in the limited conversations that Todd and I have had so far with staff about this, and those of you in the community, we've invited several already to join the stewards team. The number one concern and criticism is, how are you going to fill the room? Who's going to show up? Just a sense of 1,000 sounds like a great number, but are you really going to get that? And I truly hope we do. We do have a plan for that involving the channels that we already use, our e-news, principal updates, perhaps even one call for the large events, district website and social media, YouTube video channel. Our stewards team will be critical in this, in that group of people should represent our community as a whole, and their primary responsibility will be reaching out into our community and inviting their peer groups, their neighbors, their friends to come to these meetings. If we sense that we need something larger and more direct, we can look at targeted mailings. The district has done about a quarterly postcard at about 30 cents a piece. If we were to do that, it wouldn't be the entire purpose of the card. It would just be one thing that's on a card that we were already going to do, but it is another way to reach 10,000 homes relatively easily. And then announcing meetings through our community, and lots of different options for that. If you're curious about what the outcomes of these 3 phases might be, it is more than just a 1-sentence line about beliefs and a 1-sentence about vision and a 1-sentence about mission. We are hopeful that this would give us a tremendous amount of qualitative data from our community. So everything from these meetings would be transcribed. And while a discussion may spend 20, 30 minutes on Common Core or curriculum, and that language may not make its way into vision or mission specifically, all of that information would still be recorded and then shared with you gentlemen on the Board of Education for your decisions. And with that, I'd like to introduce the facilitator Todd and I have been working with on this. His name is Jeff Steck. He has a tremendous amount of experience in facilitating community dialogues like this, and I will let him speak for himself and answer your questions.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Steck, and at this stage, you basically heard the plan that Todd and Karen and I and input from other folks have developed. And essentially, I'd just like to open it to you all. That's the basic direction and the basic structure. But really, my biggest concern is what questions do you have? And Mr. McDonald and I had a long conversation on the phone. That was very helpful. Did meet with Mr. Anderson and Jay Stuckey, right? We had a great conversation that very much helped shape what this might look like going forward. So I would love any questions from the board just to clarify your concerns and doubts about this process.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And what,
Sure.
what
Yeah. So actually, I grew up in like every time I've come up here, I take 73 from downtown where I live in East Price Hill because I like driving through the village, and it's very much like the northern suburb of Detroit that I grew up in. It became a suburb as I lived there, but it was originally a sheep farming town, a small downtown, and over the years became suburbanized. And so I was actually confronted as the first family that moved into the first subdivision in a rurally zoned township. There are no commercial districts at all in our township. People were very hostile to my family and those of us who moved into those new subdivisions. So I've dealt with from an early age the fallout from changing communities. And so that's part of why I do the work that I do. Also being a son of 2 Detroiters who literally went through the riots in Detroit, moved out, were born and raised in the city, moved out after the riots. We have watched the city of Detroit, obviously you all know what's happened there. So I've got a real passion for healing communities way before they get to the point that Detroit got to. So I went to law school at the University of Michigan, came down to Cincinnati, worked in a large law firm, Dinsmore and Scholl. I think it's the biggest law firm downtown. Then practiced in family law for 5 years after I was at Dinsmore for 3 years. Got a lot of experience in some of the challenges that happened to low-income families as they're going through divorces, as the Department of Human Services is taking children from them. That led me to, after 5 years, to get a job with the United Way of Greater Cincinnati. I started their plan giving program, their estate giving program, asking high net worth donors to give to United Way and their associated charities. And it was at that time that I started doing a lot of strategic planning for nonprofits. And over the last probably 14 years, have shifted from nonprofit strategic planning to the intersection of communities and citizens, especially governments and citizens. How do governments work more collaboratively with citizens? And initially that was focused with municipal work. We've done a lot of work, and still do a lot of work in the city of Cincinnati. But education has been much more the focus of my work and Citizens for Civic Renewal, which is the nonprofit that I'm the director of. So in the last 3 years, I've worked with Lakota local schools, Princeton, Norwood, and well, just Cincinnati Public I've done a fair amount of work with. So I find that the work in bringing diverse stakeholders together to collaborate on building a community or building whatever, achieving whatever goals those are, really lands better in public education, because with municipal relationships, citizens still see cities as just a service provider. Just take out the trash, or, pick up my trash, keep my roads paved. But there's a much more emotional connection between communities in the school district, because even folks without kids in the district still feel on some level, these are our children, and this is our community. And so people tend to participate more passionately. Attendance, as Karen mentioned, is much, much easier when we invite people to educational processes than it is for municipal processes. So that's how I got here in front of you, is through, that's my basic journey. So does that help you understand?
Yeah, I mean, it helps everybody, and also helps the audience.
Thank you for asking. I do have a statement that I did prepare, if you'd like to hear that in lieu of questions. Again, questions is the best way to, generally for folks to get a handle on this. I do have to say that what citizen engagement looks like is difficult to understand. I helped the Norwood School District put together a drug prevention, abuse and prevention coalition that involved professionals from the Talbot House and other service organizations along the schools, the police, churches, different community organizations, parent groups, and had done several large-scale meetings with them. And when I proposed another model of engagement, the chair of that committee said, or the coalition said, I don't know what you're talking about, but we will trust you based on what has happened in the past. And sure enough, we held what's called an open space meeting, and she loved it. But this is with all the flow charts, this is with a history of a relationship with this person. I work incredibly hard now at creating basically any kind of visual that will help people grasp this. But unless you experience it, it's difficult to understand how this, as we were talking, how this might actually be productive when done by somebody who's had a lot of years in this. So I understand there might be a lot of uncertainty. So here's just something that Todd and Karen and I talked about the other day. So I just wrote this down. I wanted to get this very clearly into the record, so to speak. So it's a reflection on disagreement. Think of this as a learning process. Every meeting, every conversation is an opportunity to reflect on what has already been discussed and where to go from there. No one will be forced to agree on anything. No decisions will be made without many opportunities for collective input. Disagreements won't be papered over. Agreements won't be forced where there is none. Simply, though there will be disagreements, there is nothing to argue about, because this process will explore those disagreements, build understanding on why there is disagreement, and then either find common ground or set that issue aside. In other words, this process will focus on what you agree upon so you can begin working together on something. This doesn't mean any unresolved disagreements won't come up again, but it does allow you to begin building something that almost everyone can get behind. By finding agreement, by discovering ways to work together, you will position yourself to do great things. And so really the essence of all of this work is to pick any starting point and get people talking in a way they haven't spoken to each other before, really empathizing and understanding each other's positions rather than arguing with each other's positions, and just finding some common ground so that you can start building. And so vision and mission is a great place to start because it's, as Todd and Karen, I think, did a great job describing, it's just setting the marker out there. And we're gonna gain, and Karen said, hopefully, we will have a ton of information. And Jim, you and I talked about this on the phone. You will have all kinds of information that is much more tangible and issue-based and program-based, and that's not necessarily meant to be decided upon or to resolve those issues or how to achieve those goals, but they will all come out as we talk about the big picture. So you're gonna have vision, mission, belief, or values and beliefs, vision and mission, but underneath that, you will have page after page of issues that you can actually have a qualitative sense of how hot those issues are or those goals are for community members. So there'll be a lot to work with, questions to resolve, action steps to take after this process is completed, even as it's moving forward. And every step of the way, we will have information that the district can use immediately, or that you can, questions that you can consider at this level.
So, that's the question.
Yeah.
So just as a, what drives picking a topic, whatever that topic is? Who drives that? How's that get driven? We're gonna talk about baseball, and this story group is gonna be the head of baseball conversation.
Yeah.
How's that baseball get on the table?
That's between the leadership of the district. And Mr. Petrie approached me and said, identity, values, beliefs, principles, vision and mission is where he thought that the district needed to start. I certainly could be engaged to do a study and an analysis, and I had hired several folks at the United Way to do capital campaign studies. So you ask somebody else to evaluate the community, is this community ready to give X number of dollars, and how much might that be, should you go into this campaign process? I mean, certainly I could do that, and you as a group could get some feedback from me and some data from me on where the starting point should be. But I do have a strong sense that, as Karen and Todd have done the research, that having a fresh vision and mission around which people can find common ground is the first place to start, because that's the marker.
So just as okay, so we're at vision and mission, and you have your first meeting of, how do you vision, I'm just curious in the framework of getting to the conversation. So I can see, I think those are great topics, by the way, I'm not saying there's a,
Sure.
I think we talked about that probably 2 years ago, when I think Mr. Petrie was hired. He talked about that as well during the hiring process, if I'm not mistaken. That's correct. So I'm just curious, what drives the 1,000 people to get engaged, or the stores to get engaged? What would be like at first, an example maybe, like at first meeting, whatever it is.
A good question, and this is, it works 95% of the time, though there are many other options, is why was it important enough for you to show up today? It allows people to start wherever they are. So no matter even if they're not talking vision and mission, they're in a small group of people, 5 or fewer, sometimes it's 3, depending on how big the group is. If we have 15 people, we might have 5 groups of 3. If we have 500 people, we'd have 100 groups of 5. But people would be in small groups, and the question would be, why was it important enough for you to show up today, knowing that the general topic is values, vision, and mission? But that question allows them to come, here's where I'm at. They get validation, they get empathy in the small group, they build relationships with people they don't know, because I request that folks get in small groups with people they either don't know or that they don't know very well. So you're immediately building a sense of understanding between folks, irrespective of where we all as sort of leadership team, you all hired me to do that. Wherever we decide to start with vision and mission, they can then get their voice heard where it's heard. And then we start gradually, over maybe an hour, it would take us to get into, okay, let's talk about, first of all, the values. What values matter to you? What values have sustained this community? Then we have a bunch of meetings about that, and we see what follows up. What values do you want to conserve? What values do we need to embrace in order to evolve to meet the needs of the 21st century? So anyway, that's how it works.
So basically, you take the same sense of questions in theory to different groups to find out where the lap or the overlap or the web starts getting weaker.
Now, part of what's critical from this stewards team, or whatever the team decides to name itself, but the folks that are relatively reflective of the diversity of the community, they really do play a critical role in figuring out how do we reach out to your community, because it's very different, the networks out here versus the networks, say, that Cincinnati Public Schools would deal with and how they would access their community stakeholders. So that stewards team is really gonna tell me and tell the core staffers, Karen and whoever else is on that core team, here's how we think you should go about reaching the most people and how you can really reach an inclusive set of stakeholders. How do you get to folks that don't have kids in the district? Well, the stewards will help us figure that out, because that's one of the big challenges, is to get non-parents involved in a conversation about a school district that affects everybody, even if they have a kid or not.
I was reading an article, I don't remember, they'd say I read Dayton Daily News, but I do read Dayton Daily News often. And there was an article, I don't know, it was a couple weeks ago, but it was about an outcome of I guess it was a survey outcome of sorts, and I'm not really thinking this is a survey thing that we're doing here.
There'll be some survey online.
Yeah, but this is,
data gathering.
yeah.
No, this is much more in person.
Yeah, and I remember the district conversation, and I'm trying to remember, it was about, but it seemed like the response from the district was they were uncomfortable, the leadership of the district, meaning the board and the superintendent were uncomfortable with the outcome, or maybe they interpreted the outcome differently. So I guess we should be prepared for that possibility, whatever those outcomes may be as we go through this process. But I'm not, and then in another example, I think it was something about adding things and bringing things more. And there was financial challenges but yet there was the will to take that financial step, even though the district admitted that they had financial challenges. So I guess we have to, again, be cognizant of how we manage through the outcomes, whatever those outcomes may be.
Could I comment on that?
Yeah, please.
Mr. Governor, we spoke about that issue, or amongst other things. And one of the critical pieces of this is that you always have to be, let me put it this way, there's a line, a process through which the community gets engaged. And imagine it's just, one meeting to the next meeting, get the vision, get the values done, get the vision done. But all along, there's a parallel process by a dotted line, thinking of org charts, where you are constantly, you as the board, you're constantly looped into that conversation, whether it's in this context of a public formal board meeting, whether it's individually, whether it's just you all looking at the reports. But you're constantly going to be updated on how this is progressing before any decisions are made at all. And you're going to get to step back and go, what are we hearing? And do we need to take any steps to revise the process or change some of the questions? And I know Todd built in basically an evaluation period that after the first phase, if this just isn't working out at all, and my style just doesn't fit what you all expect as a board, then you can say, let's just move on. So your involvement throughout the process is critical. And the way you listen and shape your ongoing decisions, I think, is going to be really important.
Yeah, it wasn't more just informational from what I read about just listening to reactions. Although it doesn't sound, that was that 300 question survey where all of a sudden it
Yeah,
represents.
those are very hard to find value in, to be honest with you. And I've done surveys, and it's just not the same as day after day hosting people in the room and showing them either start whole cloth, or you can say, well, here's what's been happening at other meetings. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not good. You can say, here's what happened in the first phase, values, principles, beliefs. So there's ways that you can stimulate the conversation, but it's just different being in the room. I've been working with Lakota Schools for almost 3 years now. And the board members and superintendent and any of the administrators who have regularly attended those meetings, though they get reports, everything I write down on the flip chart gets typed up and sent to them every day, the day after. They said it's just not the same as being. And that's data that comes from a live meeting. So I've just found that surveys are great to get some broad data, general sense of what the community's thinking, but that has to land in a live setting where people can really sit, groups of 5 are close together and look eye to eye, and well, what does that data mean to you, and what does it mean to me? And are we seeing circles or triangles, Pac-Man or nothing, right? So that's, in that kind of real human contact, that kind of intimacy is what allows communities to heal and not argue so much, because it's not such a formal setting that intimidates people.
Yeah, I think somebody taught me there's lies, darn lies, and statistics, and sometimes there's
Yeah.
surveys.
Right, and the community is all about their feelings.
Yeah.
And that's what you gotta hear, and that's what fundamentally, I think is the gift that I offer all of this kind of work is, partly the experience doing it on the public side, but partly it's the foundation in relationships, and how to heal those relationships. And there's a science to that, but it's as much art as science how to make that happen.
That kind of leads me into my next question, because, sometimes people don't ask questions right or make statements that may be a little bit off.
Right.
And so how are you gonna, so that happens? I mean, is there procedures, is there thoughts,
Yeah, part of that is my job on the fly to translate what someone says, either to, if it's very specific and in the weeds and the details of their kid in their room at this particular date, to say, well, what's the larger category of insight that specific example gives rise to or illuminates. Sometimes if somebody says something so vague that's, well, paint me a picture. What does that look like in the real world? So I need to have them become more specific. So part of it is just my facilitation in the moment. But most of that work happens in the small groups because they'll have 10, 15 minutes, depending on the question, to talk about. And so 5 different people get to take 15 minutes to dive deep into all of their responses. And so they essentially facilitate themselves. And well, what do you mean by that? Well, I think this, and then somebody reacts to that. And that combination of insights is what helps us refine our own views in a more holistic context. So that's essentially where the most of the work is done in the small groups. And that's one thing that I'd like to co-create and will facilitate folks how they want me to facilitate them. But one thing that I would never change is the reliance on small groups as at least half the time in any given meeting, that people would be in groups of 5 or less answering questions of themselves without a professional, well, I should say that. Sometimes you might have teachers and staff and administrators in a small group with community members, but that's all part of figuring out when that's appropriate and that's not.
Sorry for all the questions, we didn't get
No,
to
this is
talk.
great.
The first one I got.
This is great. No,
You need one?
I
still have one more. But,
You want to finish or?
yeah, just, yes. can I-
Take a break, because I have a foundational question
Okay.
about how to process it. You described the PRCT core team and the members, and then the steward team. I'm not sure I understand how those groups function.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Start with the steward team. What does the steward team do?
Can I start with the core team? Because it builds out.
Okay.
It builds out from there. It just makes it easier. So the core team we're essentially the staff. We're the workhorse. We do the basic work. We don't make any qualitative, quantitative, strategic decisions. We're just processing. So you hire me to facilitate meetings. I got to be on the core team to be there to facilitate the meeting. Somebody's got to plan the meeting, when they're going to be, where they're going to be, or how you get the refreshments there. Somebody has to be on the core team to get invitations out to the community or the staff or however that works. So that's 5, 6 people. 8 would be pretty big. So usually I like to keep it around 5 or 6, just a working team. The stewards can be as many as necessary to appropriately reflect the diversity of the community. So that might be as few as 15, 18. I find in a community like this, you might more likely get 24 or 30 people. Those folks will then get to, like as I mentioned, one of the issues that they'll have to grapple with is, the first question they have to grapple with, who else needs to be in this room? So Mr. Petrie's initial list, they're going to have to get together and reflect themselves, is this the right amalgamation of people? Is there any community perspective missing on this list of stewards? So that's one thing. Then the next thing they would start thinking about is, well, who are the community stakeholders? What are the voices out there that we need to get to? And who are the voiceless? Who are the more difficult segments of the community to get into these kinds of processes? And then how are we going to reach out to them? So you see, they're much more, the stewards team is more about guiding, and that's why they're stewarding the entire process. They're going to look at the data as it comes back from these meetings and reflect on this. And what are we noticing as the values and beliefs meetings are going forward? Do we have to adjust some of the questions in our perspective? What kind of values and beliefs, what themes are arising? I might take a stab at that and say, here's all the data we've heard, and it seems like these are the 6 themes that have arisen from the 4 meetings. Well, the stewards are the ones who would get to say, well, wait a minute, I don't know if it should be worded like that, or maybe we should have 10 versus 6, split those 2, combine those 2. So they'll be dealing with those kinds of content issues. Again, with a dotted line constantly to the board. So the stewards are much more content heavy. In the core team, we're just staffing, we're just making sure the process keeps moving forward.
So these meetings as they happen, so does the steward team have any role in these community meetings other than to summarize? Forgive me for that. I meant to make a couple of thank yous before I even started. So Mr. Petrie, Mr. Rosa, and Mr. Steck, thank you for coming and your presentation. I appreciate Mr. Rosa's summary of all of the different, basically strategic planning sessions that we've had. I think you missed one, actually. After we did the Schoolhouse of Quality, we actually hired Steve Hammond and Paul to do another one because the Schoolhouse of Quality worked very well for the bond for building the buildings and helping design buildings. And as we were going to pass operating money for that, we thought, well, that works so well, and we got a lot of community support through that Schoolhouse of Quality process. Can we turn around and use that similar process to understand the operating parameters for the district? So we've done this a lot of times, I guess is my point. And so part of me says, here we go again. And are we going to get something that's tangible out of this that we can actually use, or is it going to be, looking 3 years down the road, just another study? I heard you talk a lot, Mr. Steck, about dealing and overcoming differences with people. Is that the real goal of this, to try to overcome differences of people? And if we can get some belief statements in the process, wonderful, but is the real underlying goal to overcome these differences?
I would phrase it a little differently. There are a few different goals. One of the most critical and foundational is the extent to which communities can productively talk and collaborate and work with each other, and the extent to which there's trust between diverse community members with different points of view and backgrounds. That research has been showing over the last 30, 40 years that that's almost solely indicative of how quickly communities evolve and move forward. And there's the Bowling Alone study that was, well, not study, but text that was written by Putnam quite a few years ago. But other folks have followed up on that and said you can actually measure communities that have more interaction and collaboration between civic organizations. The level of collaboration determines the speed with which the community moves forward. And so this is a process that throughout the entire process will teach the community how to do that, but also give them an experience and build that trust and that understanding and the ability to work through disagreements. It's not meant to paper over or end all disagreements. It's to teach folks, well, how do we deal with these disagreements and still move forward despite them? So it's a capacity building process in addition to getting a vision and understanding what the identity, the values and beliefs are, getting a vision as a target, and getting a mission put together that reflects what's happening right now. Of course, that's an output. And then the third level of output is the vast amount of data that you're going to get about current passions that will be immediately, passions, questions, and issues that will be immediately actionable, irrespective of whatever happens with the beliefs and the vision and mission. So those are the three basic categories of what comes out of this.
And so we have these community groups. Is there a steward team member in these community groups? Is there a
core team member in these community?
You said community group, meaning the meetings, the gatherings,
Yes.
Yeah, oh,
Right,
right,
well,
stewards they would be, I would love it if every steward attended every meeting, but that's unlikely.
Well, maybe I'm just misunderstanding the structure of this. So let me state the wrong structure, and then you can correct me, and we can maybe dial in towards the right one, okay?
Sure.
I'm picturing a community group maybe in somebody's house, or maybe in a small room here at the school district of, I don't know, 5, 6, 10 people who are lay citizens, and they're here to, I guess, talk about beliefs and direction and those kinds of things. Who's there guiding that discussion besides you?
Oh, that's my job. So that's one of the baseline things that I do. We probably can't have 10-person meetings, or else we'll never get to the target. I think we've got 4 meetings, get 4 public meetings, content meetings, so to speak, not meetings of the stewards team planning how to get people into those rooms, but actual community content meetings. 4 for each of the 3 segments. So we need, 100 people in each of those. And absolutely, I would be at every single one of those, and I would manage the entire thing.
Okay, and then, I guess since it's a large meeting, you would expect several members of the steward team there,
Yeah,
probably several members of the core team. Okay.
Hopefully, I would hope that a good chunk of the board, if not the entire board.
Now, one of the things we talked about, and I do appreciate your time because we did have an extended conversation, but one of the things that we talked about is this issue of, when you go and you talk to a lay person, a lot of times they don't have all the background information that they really ought to have. That's not because, it's just because they don't know. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And when you go and somebody hasn't had a chance to research a particular topic, they might give you an opinion, but it might be an opinion that isn't fully informed. And so that's one of my concerns, is that, how do we make sure that people, when they participate in this, that they know the ramifications? Petroni mentioned budget, for example, okay? I mean, it's easy to sit there and say, well, we should do these things. And, or I believe that the high school should have this kind of a program, or whatever the issue may be that comes up. But if you aren't informed about, for example, the cost, or maybe other issues that, maybe we would have to do construction to protect it. There's a lot of things that people may not have a background with, but they might voice a belief because they just don't know. And so how do we get past and through that stuff?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is that because of where we're starting, those kinds of issues won't come up as much. Budget questions, we're not going to be solving the budget questions, because the vision and mission comes before those kinds of issues, where you're going to need more expert input. Expert meaning school district members, administrators, teachers, board members, whoever we would consider experts. As we go down the funnel, sort of strategic planning, vision, mission being at the top, it's much more heavily weighted to lay opinions, so to speak, because it's the direction that folks want to go. As that becomes clear, you move down this funnel, all the way to how much do we spend in this particular school building for, you were talking about lunch, lunches in the food program. Those require, and I don't know what the gentleman's name, we're going to need his opinion. He's going to be 80–90% of, well, what's that going to look like? But way up at the top, you're going to have 80–90%, well, what do all community stakeholders feel is important? With that said, however, the stewards team, and you guys with your dotted line that'll be looking throughout the process, the stewards are going to say, well, wait a minute, that's something that we actually do need to insert some education into the process. I don't think that's going to come up much, but that's part of their job, is to look at that. And then I'll just leave it at that.
Well, we're not creating another strategic plan, and I'm letting Mr. Seck finish, because I can answer a lot of your questions as well. This is not a specific set of questions. If we want to move away from mediocrity and be the #1 school district in the state of Ohio, it's time that we move that direction. The hardest part, the first question he asked me as superintendent was, are you ready to allow yourself to be put in this position to people to question you? Because the superintendents who've done this from extremely high-powered districts, a lot of times there's things come back people don't like about them. In leadership, it's very simple to create a set of questions that you want a certain response from, but it is very difficult to trust the people of the community. We're here to facilitate education for the community. This is not Todd Petrie or Tammy Strittenberger's school. This is not Dave Petroni or the school board's school to run the exact way they want it. We have been trusted by this community to make decisions to drive education for them. We have got to hear from our community. So there's not an abstract set of questions that Mr. Seck is going to be able to ask to get an answer we're going for. We're not going to be asking questions that's going to perhaps throw us into needing more money. We are looking for beliefs, we're looking for values that will define our mission and our vision so that we can look at the future. And from that point, we will build plans around that. When we're spending $600,000 on textbooks or on online materials, if we have a community that doesn't support that, we probably need to know. We need to know if the parents in this community are expecting us to prepare their kids for college. And we're going to have to do that within reason. This district has run into issues for the simple fact we've spent on what's the latest and greatest, and so supposedly, and then the next thing you find out, oh, that wasn't the best thing we should have went on because we didn't get support from the community. Part of this, and this has never been done before, you're looking at the operating and the bricks and mortars. We spent $60,000 to some extent for someone to tell us a capital needs budget before I started. We are looking at our core business. This district's never looked at the core business. It's academics. It's not passing a levy. It's not building a building. It's core academics. That is what we are about. That is what we need to hear from our parents from, our students from, our business owners, everyone that's involved, and our staff. So there is not going to be a set of questions we can ask to get this. We've got to hear from the people, and then we build on that as we go. Now, for some people, that might not be abstract or constructive enough, but for others, we're going to truly find out what people believe. That is where we're running into issues now.
One of the other issues that we talked about, and I appreciate what you're saying, because I think that one of the problems that public education has is we've given up so much local control. I mean, Mr. Anderson and I had a conversation this last weekend about this, and when you look at the amount of control that the local school district has, we've given it all away, folks. I mean, even the things that were by statute that we're authorized to do, curriculum. Board approves the curriculum, but on the other hand, the state gives us all of their standards, and we've adopted the state standards. So, the people who should have a voice through their elected representatives, because there's 5 of us who are accountable to those voters. Because of those state standards, your voice in curriculum is pretty well muted. We're being measured against the test that the state's put out there. And if we don't align to that curriculum, and yeah, we can raise the bar above that, we can use that as a floor, not a ceiling, but they've tied our hands. So all of this, about local control is attractive to me, Mr. Petrie, and I appreciate what you're saying. The other, well, I won't go into a long dissertation on local control, but just that Mr. Anderson don't want here to get for another hour. But we've given away our local control. And what this process needs to do is inform the board. Because what I don't want to do in talking to people is we live in a representative democracy. And it's designed that way for a reason. And it's the reason that I was alluding to a moment ago, where, we have a lot of experience. I'm starting my 7th year on the school board. And amongst all of us here, this is your 2nd term, Mr. Anderson. Dr. Malone has been in the business for, I don't even want to guess because I'll get it wrong, and Mr. Stuckey as well. what we don't want to have happen is this process take away that information that we've gleaned, because while having that community input is important, it needs to be received with the filter of the knowledge of district issues that we all have acquired. You, Mr. Petrie, Mrs. Strittenberg, the rest of the staff, and the board, because there are 5 of us who are elected and accountable to the voters. And I don't want a process like this in any way to circumvent that authority, because that's really the only thing that the people have. I mean, we'll talk to as many people as you talk to, Mr. Sack, it will still be a minority of this community. And as much as you try to be diverse and pick diverse opinions, it's still possible that you may not have that diversity. And when people express their concerns, it's like I said, they don't have the type of experience that we've had here, knowing what issues are, and all of that input it must be filtered through the board before decisions get made. And I have seen processes like this in other places actually be used to circumvent the board. Because what happens is you get a group of people and they participate and they come up with these ideas, and it comes out from that group of people a particular recommendation. And then those of us who are in the leadership positions might have some other information, but we're in the very uncomfortable position of having to diverge from a group of citizens who have put a lot of work and effort into something that, if they didn't have all of the background information, they could very possibly come up with the wrong conclusion, or in some cases that I've seen in other places, they have been kind of steered in a particular direction. And that's something that this process absolutely cannot do. And that would,
Well, and again, we're not going to be going and asking the community for which textbook do you want. That's not the purpose of this. This is at a greater scale of the direction we're going over the next 10 to 20 years. We've never had that here. With the quality of student that we have in this district, I have yet to work in a district with the caliber of students consistently across the board at this. Yet, when you look at our awards for baccalaureate scholars to college scholarships, to our kids that are involved, we're just now bringing in Project Lead the Way. We're doing those because we feel those are best. But we need to hear from the parents here as well. So the bottom line is we're getting feedback to make decisions with, but even on that, we're not going to have specific questions that we're looking for. We're looking for a vision. When we start some of these, we may show a video to start out of where is the country at now, and how has the world changed over just the last 10 years. When we think of Facebook, we think of Twitter. That didn't even exist 5 years ago, and now all of a sudden it monopolizes everything that we do. What's going to happen in the next 5 years? How's that going to impact education? We're still trying to work and bring your own device to school. We just left Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama. They have 22,000 kids. Every single one of them has a computer. They have a 50% poverty rate, and they are in the top 100 high schools in the United States of America. We don't fight half the challenges they do, yet they are outperforming us. When you walk into each of their buildings, right on the front page is the vision, and it's very specific of what they're going to do. It's not a mission. If you look at the mission statement we have in place right now, underneath it are subheadings of other things that should have been put in there, but somehow they weren't put in there. It's incomplete. Our kids are too good to have something incomplete. We need a vision of where we're taking this district for the future. It's more than budgets, it's more than finance, it's more than perhaps which textbook we're going to have next year. But as we purchase these things, we need to know the values of this community. We've talked about this numerous times. So to hear what the people have to say is exactly what we're going to be bringing back. There's not going to be budgeting decisions and those things out of this. We have the budget that we have to live within. It's not about the teachers we need to hire for the third grade guarantee or anything like that. This is about the future of the district. Totally different than what's ever been done here.
Mr. Anderson, let me yield the floor and maybe you can come back to me after a while.
Anybody else have any thoughts? Comments? Go, Dave?
Yeah, the good news is I think today we have a better foundation in Springboro, which does have to look at different aspects of operations. And clearly, I don't disagree, Mr. Petrie. The students that we continue to see excel, the parents in this community are good examples of what we have here to expand upon. So I don't think I've, the good part about what I'm hearing from you, because again, it's the first time I've chatted, I haven't really dug into any of the materials that have been presented, or I don't think I've seen a lot of material, is that it's not going to be a 300-question survey that's going to end up being something that's all of a sudden going to be drawn into place. And looking at trusting the participants who are driving this, I'm comfortable going forward learning what we're going to learn, but I think it's due time that we have that opportunity to bring in a more meaningful conversation.
Well,
in my opinion.
Yeah, to Mr. Regano's point, would be against all my principles to create some sort of process that in some way, shape, or form disenfranchised the elected officials. And the elected officials, that's part of the structure, and it's not going to change. And so information will come to you. Decisions will come to you. There'll be information that doesn't need to be acted, or I should say could be acted on. You'll get information that you don't have to decide on, but there will be ultimately questions that you get to vote on. None of this will ever, there's not going to be a vision and mission in a set of beliefs that you won't be able to approve as a board. My hope is that something like that this process will create a set of statements that all of you feel like this works for me. That's the whole point of this work. And if you all, if any number, it would be a failure to me if it were a 3-2 vote at the end of this process, because you all have to feel good about it, and the community has to feel good about it. That doesn't mean that each of you, or every community member will be 100% happy with everything in the final product. That's the whole idea of true consensus is, I think it's absurd. I've had arguments with people over the years, other process facilitators, like, listen, true consensus is a little much. 80% comfort, we were talking earlier. So at what level are you, just whatever discomfort you have, you can get over that hump. You're 80% comfortable with what comes out of this. And if we get everybody in the community, or at least some threshold number in the board, to feel like, yeah, I'm 80% good with this. You might change a word here and there, but you're at 80%, that would be my hope, is that all 5 of you say, yeah, I'm there, and we feel really good about what our community created together. So yeah, absolutely, we want you to feel good about this, and you have the power to vote yea or nay.
Just a couple comments. Number one, I think it's, I'm kind of a solution-based thinker. I'm always trying to figure out how you can make something work, or how you can make it better. And there are a divergent group of thoughts, even in this room, as to how we might go about it and how we might accomplish it. When you were addressing Mr. Regano, what I took away from that was, you mentioned moving forward. I'm a believer, if you're not moving forward, you're standing still, you're getting passed by. So I like the idea of taking these different viewpoints. And I agree with Jim that it should go through the board, and the board should be comfortable with what it is. But what strikes me is the fact that the superintendent of the system and his staff, in my opinion, are basically putting themselves out there, and Mr. Petroni mentioned it, be uncomfortable, and it will, and so if they're willing to risk that and stretch themselves and be uncomfortable, then I think perhaps the rest of us should as well. And but I don't want it to be something like a sugar high, like you go out and get all excited, and we get this started, and then 6 months later it's all forgotten. That's a waste of time. I think we've probably all been a part of some of those in the past, so we want to make it work. I would say I wouldn't even do it if we're not all going to be committed to being open-minded and seeing it through.
Well, and to have your support in getting people to show up. I mean, the stewards team's going to carry that. The board really shouldn't dominate a stewards team, because you have your own forum with very direct access into the process. But your active involvement in getting people to show up, to voice their opinion, and that would be very helpful. And just to your point about the sugar high, one of the elements of probably the interim reports, but definitely the final report, will be what are the most challenging questions facing the district. Okay, we agreed on the values, we agreed on the vision and mission. We're going to find out what the most difficult choices are. We call that, what are the paradoxes? There's all kinds of different frames for that, but what are the ultimate questions that are most vexing this community will come up, and you will have a list of those, and you will have had experiences to be in the room when folks kick that back and forth, but in a controlled way, right? In a way that it doesn't get out of hand and people don't get disrespectful, and we can manage and actually just identify, here's the challenge in front of us. So I think you'll find that very helpful.
Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I think Mr. Anderson did address a good point. We are definitely, from a leadership standpoint, you do put yourself out there. When you do things of this nature, you may have your contracts and that agreement papers. Right there. That is one of the things we're looking at. But please understand, from a leadership standpoint, it is not my goal. It would be simple to come in here today and say, based on our data, which last July, first presentation Ms. Springboro and I gave, as we told you, we have a lot of our kids in the proficient area. Now on our third grade test scores, we're a little lower. We told you that was what was going to happen. What did we do? We created an efficiency plan to put more reading intervention specialists to elementary level, more gifted people to address the data. Those kinds of things are simple to do. You pay me to do that. But to overcome, where is the direction that parents want for their kids and community members, retired folks who have put their kids through school, what is this community willing to support in looking at the future? That is what we need to know. There's a lot of different avenues we could go. But as soon as we go in leading in a certain direction, and one of us lead, then there's another leader to come in with another direction. That's called lack of leadership. That's called lack of vision. And when you don't have vision, you're going to get what we have gotten. 10 different paradigm shifts, failed levies. Some people think we need them, some think we don't. Why is that? We have got to get a vision to move forward. That is what we're looking at here. And it's very obscure when you talk about it. It's just like teaching a lesson. It's very simple to come in and say, kids, we have 10 questions to read today. We're going to read the story, and I want you to answer these. But it's very difficult to come in and say to them, today we want you, based on these scientific principles, to develop some form of robot that does a particular function based off of this formula. That challenges kids to think. Which type of education do the people of Springboro want? That's what we're looking at. I believe our kids have all the potential in the world. 2-parent homes, even when there aren't 2 parents at home, they support it. They have money behind it because most of their parents are highly educated and have great jobs. We have the recipe for greatness here that a lot of school districts don't have. We should be taking advantage of that. And I don't believe we fully tapped into that as the leader of this school district. We need a vision in terms of the direction that we're going to go. With that said, I have the contract here tonight for Mr. Steck I wanted to give to the board. And basically, this will be broken up into 3 different sections. We'll do the belief first. We'll report back to you what the beliefs are. If you feel that that's not qualitative enough or quantitative enough for us to move forward, then the contract is dissolved at that point. The overall contract is $10,000. Each phase is $3,333. Basically, we have outlined the number of hours that will be put into this. We've already probably put an even 15 hours into talking about this and looking at different avenues. We're anticipating 150 to 200 hours will be involved in this. And throughout the process, through each phase, there'll be a report back to the board for you to determine as a collective 5 if we're going to move forward into the next phase. So this isn't one of those things to where we pay all the money up front and you get what you get. This is going to be a lot of communication as we go through, and a lot of times spent at board meetings having this discussion. What I will be asking on April 3rd is for you to approve or disapprove of this particular contract. If there's any questions about that, feel free to ask now and/or send me an email. But what we have done here is broken it down into 3 quadrants of pay. We've broken it down to what will be delivered by the hour. And of course, you've met the person that we're going to be bringing before you. So with that said, this is the contract you will be voting on April 3rd. Any follow-up questions before we go? Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Stecker. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
I have a 9-year-old. Do you need anything else? He's not going to interrupt. Thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
Move on to item 10.4, Lee Benson.
Good evening. What I've passed out to you is the new timeline that has been established for our resident educators. In years past, when we had gotten new teachers, they were under the old praxis system, which was that they would have to take a test in order to get their certification. ODE, the Ohio Department of Education, has changed the system and the certification. We have about 8 teachers right now in year 3. We have 12 to 14 in year 2, and we have about 16 to 20 in year 1. What that means for our district is that, as you can see, they get a resident educator 4-year license. At the end of the 4-year license and having gone through the resident educator program for 3 years, they then have obligations to take different information and send it to the state, and it is actually in year 3, everything's being uploaded and will end up being evaluated by an outside person for them to either pass to then get their 5-year license, which is the normal license, teaching license, or they will go into year 4 and have to redo some areas of that evaluation. In years past, our supplemental schedule has provided for mentors in year 1. This year, we have had, since we have 14 year 2 people, and half of them, 8 of them, are brand new to the district. So they're in their 2nd year of teaching, but we hired them in after their 1st year somewhere else. So basically, they're brand new teachers. What I am going to propose and bring to you for board approval in the next board meeting is that we provide the mentors, which we've had to provide for our year 2 people, and a $400 stipend or supplemental to cover the amount of work that they have had to put in. For example, last year when we had our year 2 people in that program, there were only 8 people. So we have one person that gets a supplemental. Her name is Deanne Estel. She is from 5 Points, who is actually doing the year 3 people. But last year she was able to do the requirements for those people for their 2nd year. This year, with the amount of year 1, year 2, and year 3 people, we have not had enough people to cover the mentorships of these people. So we have, I'm going to bring next time, that it's going to be $4,800 total for the mentors that are in elementary, middle school, and high school that have been mentoring this year. You can see in what I handed out that there are 3 to 4 hours per month, which is locally determined. But given that more than half of them are brand new to the district, it has created more work for our mentors to get them acclimated to the Springboro system, plus do all the resident educator and prepare them for OTES. So my proposal will be that we create a stipend for those second-year mentors for our resident educators for this 1 year only. Next year, part of the induction process and part of the resident educator process that will fall under this, we will not need as many mentors because we are going to do more of a cohort program, which means we're going to get 3 or 4 of these first-year people that are going to second year and actually within the building create a cohort with 1 person overseeing. We don't foresee having as many first-year teachers next year, given the fact that we do not have as many people close to retirement. So this past year, given that between 25 and 30% of our staff is brand new, half of those people are either in the first year or second year of their resident educator program. So they have needed more support. It's been just an extraordinary circumstances this year that has created this issue. Any questions?
Ms. Fitz, you mentioned that the purpose here was to inform the new people about the Springboro way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to understand more about that myself.
Okay.
And what's unique about Springboro, how we deliver curriculum and such.
Mm-hmm.
Is there information that you could provide to the board that perhaps these resident educators are providing to those new teachers, so that at least, I don't know if you guys don't want to say so, but for me, I would like to understand what it is, what their job entails, and I think that this might help.
Absolutely. I can tell you offhand, having worked with some of the people that are being mentored through the resident educator program, we have at least 3 teachers that were at a charter school last year, which they have different regulations and different things that they are being asked to do compared to a public school and some of the things that we're asked to do. We also have several teachers in the resident educator program who were full-time substitute teachers last year. So as they got credit for a year, but they weren't a full-fledged teacher with the different obligations such as the evaluation system and things like that, that also has created a difference. But I would be happy to break that down for you and give you more information. That's what I know off the top of my head.
Okay, well, and, you know, Mrs. Strittenberger and I had, and Mrs. Ringwood had a little sit down to try to answer this question that I think that you're addressing part of, which was, you know, when we have a new teacher in, what is it that we give them so that they now become Springboro teachers, so that they know, you know, what they're supposed to be, what curriculum they're supposed to be delivering, what sequence they should deliver it in, those kinds of things. I don't know if this gets to that level or not, but
it sure does.
I'm trying
It'll be part of the new induction process because we are finding as we bring in new people that there is quite a learning curve with expectations.
And that is one of our district goals that you are
Exactly.
responsible for.
Yes. And even down to, you know, how we do lunch charges and get the kids to the cafeteria and free and reduced lunch and, you know, EMIS and all the payroll and, you know, all of those things. So it's,
I hope it doesn't become a big volume of things, because that, I just wouldn't be able to get through that. But I would like to know what the day-to-day burdens are on them. I mean, we hear that there's less and less time to actually spend teaching. And so I'd like to gain an understanding of what all of these things are. As Mrs. Ringler was sitting with Mrs. Strittenberger and myself, and she was describing the things that I guess it was a third grade teacher would have to do. It seemed, to me, it seemed rather hectic as to what they had to do. And, you know, I just like to get a good understanding of, a better understanding of what they face on a day-to-day basis.
okay. Be happy to share that.
I think the mentoring program is one of the best things in education in business, and you hire new people, they're hired. We spend a lot of time and effort to coach and mentor them along. Education, you hire a new teacher, put her in the classroom, let me know how it's going. I mean, I think it's a lot more than just you, and I think that's great. Whatever information, but it's more than just putting in front of us stuff. And I would also say it's probably not as much a Springboro way as the professional way. And teaching them all the nuances, not teaching, sharing with them all the nuances that instead of them having to learn these lessons the hard way, but having a mentor can ease that transition. So I think a lot of it's emotional as well. So, especially in teaching, like you said, hectic. I mean, I think a true mentor can really have an impact on the teacher and the district.
Absolutely.
I think, just to add to that is, taking away the variables of a teacher, a brand new teacher coming in and feeling this sense of not wanting to make a mistake, if you will. I think, while there's this laundry list of things that need to be done, via, the lunch duties and all of that, I think this whole induction process really speaks to, I think, what Mr. Pagano is saying is that they need to know specifically what needs to be addressed and what needs to be focused on instructionally. And I think there's, two different areas that are very, very important. However, getting to that, place where you don't want to wait till someone fails in order to be there to help them, be successful, because ultimately that's going to transpose itself into the classroom. So I think there's that notion that we want to kind of front load our opportunities to get that in front of people so that they know what they're up against.
Well, quite frankly, I mean, when we look at visiting, there's a lot of ways we can do that rapidly. I know I sent you guys some text from the classrooms we were in Alabama. They could, in kindergarten, they literally, in a guided reading program, can use their tablet and just like that get instant feedback. We don't have that right now, which then requires the lessons taught when the teacher gets time later in the day, they're able to calculate that information. It's a slow return. With some of the online textbooks that they have, they're able to highlight a word, get instant understanding of what that word means, or a thesaurus, or they are able to hit key words to go back into a particular part of the story. I mean, as we use, that's the whole process of board docs to some extent, and why we do things on technology to make them faster and more efficient. Those are the things that we're looking at. The days of teaching in isolation, of closing the classroom door and teaching, they're gone. Now, you might be able to get by with that, but the way the state has changed things to where they're going to be rated individually, those days are gone. And the days of passing a test, 75% pass 40 to 60% of the test, yeah, you can get by with that a little bit. You can't do it anymore. That's why we have to ramp up the philosophies that we have educationally, but at the same time, we have to deliver something that the community wants and embraces, or otherwise we outrun the people, the consumers. Anyone in business, all of your business people, if you're not delivering what the customer wants, you don't stay in business. Education's never really stopped to ask what the customer wants. That's why we're all struggling. That's what we have to find out.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We'll go on to item 10.5, Ms. Strittenberger.
Thank you. Today I want to share with you just a little bit about the data, the third grade data that you have probably with you on your board docs, and just kind of speak to the purpose of this this opportunity to share what we have in front of you. And what I chose to do this particular time is to look at our like districts and to see kind of where we fall, not only as a district, but then comparatively with other districts, and try to work really hard to respond to this need. And while our scores did drop, enough to be somewhat concerned, and I mean that respectfully, one of the things I found out in making some phone calls with some of these other districts is to kind of get a sense of where they're at as well. Again, the purpose is to share out that information and try to respond accordingly in our own district. One of the things that was very clear is that what they're finding within their teachers and within their organization is the level of questioning that's taking place and what's being asked of the students is beginning to look a little bit different. And what I mean is the processes and the product of responses from questions is beginning to be more in-depth and more rigorous. And from that, I think we not only as a district, but as educators across the state and looking at our state information, you know, we can compare a lot of apples to oranges in this scenario. And I think what we have tried to do, and I think we've done a really good job with a lot of evaluation of our data, is to respond by, and I think Mr. Petrie had mentioned this earlier in his conversation, is we have some goals, and those goals are pretty much defined by our earliest learners. We need to support them and get to them as soon as possible. And we're responding to that by obviously a new adoption. We're looking at the balanced framework of our language arts area with reading and writing. And we're looking at the use of a tool that will progress monitor and create data that we can respond to on an ongoing basis so that when we get this data and the teachers get their data by progress monitoring, they can respond to that in a timely manner through our guided reading initiative. And from that is to look at that data and because of our structure and looking at our district goals, we're looking at that model, if you will, of balanced literacy and responding to the data in data meetings that are taking place in our buildings. And that's being facilitated by the administrators and the teachers in the classroom. So I think as we look at this district data, obviously we want to look at it in such a way that we want to be critical thinkers of what needs to happen. When we look at our advanced and accelerated numbers there with 59 or 56.9 and last year being 60.8, one of the things we focused on was our students that were in the proficient area. And while that has dropped a little bit, we also are looking at the percentages that fall into the basic and the limited. And those numbers increased. So we have to define these numbers by looking at individual students. And so to look at these numbers, while they're very valuable, I really feel that we're putting together a system, a model, and what's important to prescribe instruction on a per kid basis, a per student basis. So, that was kind of my purpose in giving this particular model of information as a whole, because I think we have worked really hard to put together a program and a model, as I mentioned, that creating more reading intervention, more instructional practices through differentiation in the guided reading process that's going to respond to meeting the mark as things begin to change. And as I mentioned, these, with the assessments that we would like to do on an ongoing basis is to increase that rigor and through a product. So what it is that we're doing in the process to create this rigorous product that the students are going to have to be able to do over time. So that's kind of the purpose of this data right now.
Well, quite frankly, this data has no reflection of any reading intervention gifted support that was added this year. For example, last year at this time, our kindergarten, 50% of their kids were not seen by a reading intervention. Today, 100% of their kids who are in tier 2 or tier 3 are seen by reading intervention because we've reallocated resources. Next year will be the year to tell if that worked. So this really is, I mean, quite frankly, it does show that we're still strong amongst the groups that are here, and our teachers are doing a solid job. But when we have 24, 25 kids in a class, you know, Tammy has said it many times, Ms. Strittenberger, that if you need shoulder surgery, you don't go to your family practitioner, you get a specialist. When we have a large proficient area, there's not enough time in the day for teachers to differentiate to be able to make that happen. We have to have specialists in the rooms making it happen. We have that now, but this doesn't reflect the change of the staff.
Clearly, something happened with the test this year because most school districts lost 10 or so points, maybe some 8, maybe some 12, but of all these comparable school districts, there were only a couple that actually improved. And one of them was Lorraine, and I'm not familiar with Lorraine other than this. I had an occasion to go out to ODE and pull up the performance index rankings, and Lorraine schools, if my memory's right, was one of the, you know, they were in the top 50. And this was the school building, so I wasn't looking at the district, but, you know, they had some schools up there in that top 50 range, and we're in the 100 and some, so we're pretty good. This is out of a couple thousand school buildings, yes, over 3,000 buildings. So, the other thing that I saw when I was out there looking at those performance index scores, which is just a ranking, a raw ranking from best to worst based on the proficiency test. Well, and I know you guys went and you went down to Alabama just the other day here to look at somebody who was doing great things. Well, the #1 school out there was Wells Academy, which is a public school in Steubenville, Ohio, up in Cleveland area. And, you know, Dr. Coles brought up the Common Core, and, you know, the Common Cores are issues. That's giving up even more local control. I mean, right now we got the state telling us what to do, and I shudder to think what's going to happen when the feds start telling us what to do. and so Common Core is an issue, and it's an issue that if folks aren't aware of, they should do some research on it. But we don't have to live with the Common Core standard. We can put our own standard in place, and it can be better than the Common Core. But the question is, well, if you don't do Common Core, well, then what do you do? Well, I happen to be going through these performance index. I don't even remember why I was going through those things. But the #1 school was Wells Academy. So let's go out on the internet and see what's about Wells Academy. And so I Googled Wells Academy, and there's an article, and granted, this was an advertisement, okay, for their curriculum, and they're in elementary school, I think K4, and there was one of the things I ran across was an advertisement from their curriculum provider. But what the ad was about is that they adopted this particular curriculum, and they improved it. I mean, it's a curriculum for the poor school districts. And I didn't do the demographic research to find out if Steubenville was one of these areas that's.
It's over on the river.
But they have taken it by adopting this curriculum and not accepting the state standard as the target. They have taken themselves up to the top performance index of every school building in the state. And it wasn't just by a point or a fraction of a point. A lot of these numbers, it's fractions of a point off. It was by 5 points. They were a full 5 points ahead of the next school, which kind of shows that if you have commitment to a particular direction, that you can elevate the bar. And you don't have to be tied to necessarily the Common Core or the state standards. Yes, you need to be able to attend to, those need to be part of the core because you got to take the test and you want to do well on the test. But, you know, Springboro, there's another report out there called the EVAS report, EVAAS. And that's a real interesting report because what they do is they take they take the performance of a grade level for the entire district. So for instance, say we're looking at third grade. And they'll look at what percentile your third graders rank in the state. Our third graders rank about 60 percentile on the whole. I'm sure we have some that are higher, probably have some that are lower, but we're at the 60 percentile. An average school in the state would be at the 50th percentile. We're at 60. Schools like Indian Hill are up at 70. Wyoming, 70. So that's kind of, some of the difference. But the interesting thing about these percentile scores is they use them from year to year to year. Because if you were in the 60 percentile and then the next year you're in the 60 percentile, well, those kids got a year's worth of learning, which is what we want to do, right? If they're here for a year and they get a year's worth of learning, we hit the target. If they get more, that's even better. If they get less, well, something happened there, and that's where this value add measurement comes in. You look at these percentile changes year to year to year. But, so that's another interesting measure, but I think that, and maybe this can be part of this values, vision, beliefs project, is, do we insist on mooring ourselves to the state standards or to the Common Core? Or can we do something like Wells Academy did and go out and investigate some other alternatives that might really give us a good performance? And so these results are, I don't know if they're all that particularly interesting to me. Not that I'm not interested in how we perform, but when you see that we lost 10 points and everybody else did, I think that there's something going on with the test. I think looking at that percentile data, if we went from the 60th percentile, if our kids went from the 60th percentile to the 57th percentile, I'd be concerned about that because they didn't keep pace with the other kids in the state. That's what they were telling me. So
I think there's, and to add to that, and I would agree, there's a lot that you can glean from this, but I don't believe that we should put a lot of stock necessarily in the fact that you're reaching a benchmark, and because that's the lowest level of kind of passing, if you will, and I think in theory too, and there's research out there that if a child has a struggling teacher for 2 years in a row, then there's some challenges there. And so I think, when we talk about the induction process, when we talk about meeting some of these goals that we have established, I think we're trying to address some of that and trying to hit some of these targets. So, to speak to meeting, an expectation that someone, kind of imposes upon you at whatever level, I think it's our responsibility to, far exceed those as best we can. And that's the delivery of some sort of articulation of what's expected for students individually, not just collectively in a third grade. We have students that we should be targeting in, and I believe that we're really trying to address that through creating those expectations that are increased as opposed to those benchmarks that says, "Ooh, we made it." Well, that's not necessarily always so good. It definitely, you want to celebrate those, but you also want to have a critical eye on whether or not those students in that performance index, or for value add purposes, that their trajectory is going up as opposed to flatlining. We want to exceed that year's worth of progress if we possibly can, if we can so choose to do so in our instructional practices. So I think that's, so it is a struggle for me sometimes to necessarily throw or present some information that can be misleading, because I really truly believe that we have a lot of successful learners, successful teachers, but can we reach that highest level through our expectations? I think we're trying to address that through our district goals and creating that vision and those expectations.
Oh, if I could add, Tammy, we're not settling for the standards now. The Common Core is a set of standards. Our Journeys textbook series that we spent $390,000 on last year, that's not gonna change. When we put things like guided reading into place and more intervention, we're not settling for the standards. The two schools you mentioned, Indian Hill and Wyoming, I've been in both of them. I've worked in that area. Go look at the amount of staff they have for reading intervention. Kettering High School, they're number 5th in this state. They have 39 intervention specialists. In our high school, we have 9. If we want to go and hire all of these people and have that much individualized attention and spend $122,000 a year per building on professional development to equip these people with these things, we're going to see a significant increase in certain things. However, it's going to destroy our budget. So when we compare apples to apples of what other districts are doing, a lot of these that are top notch that we've been in, I've spent a lot of time in those. I have close friends that are in management there. So I know pretty much about what they have in terms of staffing. We're slim on staffing and we're still making some outstanding progress. We added in an area we had none. And all these failed levies we had over the year, they totally wiped out all of the reading intervention in this district. We're adding it back little by little. So there's a lot of things that go into play with this, but regardless what curriculum we have, the guided reading, collecting data, that's all about good instructional for individualized attention. Those standards don't even address that. So the reason these have failed, one of the things that the Park Assessments has done, and again, I know it's a federal debate. I agree, I understand, I know it's a federal debate. However, the questions, the reason for this, they're much more complex. What the Common Core is doing, what Park has done, is it's taken us from low-level knowledge questions to questions to where kids have to synthesize and apply. That should have been this way 20 years ago in education. Now I realize nationally there is debate that the federal government stepped in. I understand that. But as far as the quality of instruction we're going to deliver to kids, it's going to be much more in-depth. It's going to challenge kids more to explain themselves in detail, and it's going to develop problem solvers, which as a whole, as a country, is going to help us better in the market of science, math, and all these other areas. So we can twist this any way we want to twist it, but we have to see what the future holds in terms of when we put these things into place as well. So there's a lot to look at here.
Yeah, I would just add that the debate over the rigor of the Common Core is also an open question. There are a number of educators that point out to the Common Core not being as rigorous as it's being advertised. We don't have to have that debate here. All I meant by raising the issue was to, one, say it's something that our community needs to be aware of.
Absolutely.
And hopefully they can weigh in through this community involvement process on that and other issues. And then also that there are other things out there, and that Wells Academy was an example. I don't know what their funding per pupil is. I wasn't suggesting that we should attain or try to attain the level of performance that Indian Hill or Wyoming might have, because I need to figure out a way to say this without getting in trouble. But when kids come and in 3rd grade, we measure them at the 60th percentile. I mean, yeah, we're educating in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade. Unfortunately, we don't have data that goes before 3rd grade because the testing doesn't start until 3rd grade. But each community kind of has a demographic of how smart your kids are. The average in the state would be 50%. We're above that. We're at like 60% at 3rd grade. Wyoming's demographic probably just brings them kids just because of the nature of the community in Indian Hill. They probably bring them kids at 70%. So when they move year to year to year, their kids stay at 70%. Well, they're just kind of doing what their job is. They're not necessarily doing any better or worse than we are. When our kids come in at 60%, we keep them at 60%. I mean, what more? I mean, you can hope for more, but I don't know that you can ask for more than, getting them a year's worth of learning each year. So I'm not, by bringing that illustration up, I wasn't suggesting that we should take our folks at 60% and try to get them to 70%. I guess we should try to do that, but I'm not sure that that's an attainable goal.
I think that is what we need to decide, because I think we could get to 70%, but I'm familiar with Wyoming and Indian Hill, and to Todd's point, I guarantee they have more resources, and it's more money. So if we want to get there, it's going to take that, which is going to be another discussion on the other side. So I don't have the answer. It's just
And at
where
the
do
other,
we want to, who do we want to be?
right. And at the other end of the spectrum, you've got a Wells Academy, which I guess is a core area. I'm not familiar with it, but you are, so. Anyway,
Just,
enough said on
Well, Steubenville is, I know they're a poor area, Alabama, poor area, yet we just heard what they're doing. So
I think I've seen the capacity of our administrative team to get pretty creative in, delivering or moving or helping to, just like the plan that moved more resources down into the lower grades, and it was something that was creative, in business, any business, whether it's education or not, that creativity can go a long way, budget-wise and everything else. I guess I just want to, so the data to me, again, it seems like it's a snapshot sitting here. And so when we have a snapshot, is this like a baseline for, is performance the right word, or is this something that is this something that we can start monitoring? I'm assuming I don't know what I'm trying to ask. The data seems like it's got value, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't want to dismiss it. But what do we do with it next year or the tests, what in the next session?
Well, it's coming up here real soon.
Yeah, I know.
But I think to kind of speak to how do we address this, I think what we need to do is, while this is very important, I think what we need to do is begin to look at individual students through our progress monitoring, through the tools that we are using and
Sure.
accessing in our framework of instruction, which is a 90-minute block. And we are obviously with guided reading so that we can become more prescriptive. And then we have qualifying data that demonstrates growth for that particular student, that shows over time how those students are doing. And that is the report that we then share and with an end result of this is how we've done. Because just to show this does not necessarily answer the questions that we need to know as we begin to kind of evolve in adopting materials and providing professional development and using our resources for additional reading intervention. So I think it needs to get to that level of reaching individual students and seeing how they are being progress monitored.
Which is what you've been transitioning to.
That's exactly what we.
So,
Yes.
So your comment was that next year, so when you use the term next year, we're thinking about this time?
Correct.
Next year?
And hopefully the next round of third grade tests at the end of the year.
seems to change.
Right. And so, but I do want to be clear, it's not our goal to have to come back and increase costs and those types of things. It's built on investing the knowledge in the teachers who are in the classroom. And any research you find, the number one thing that accelerates student achievement is the teacher in front of the students. And it's investing the time and energy of professional development to educate the people who are in front of the kids. Now, granted, these materials and resources are huge, but it is the people using those products to deliver to the kids that is going to make a tremendous difference. And Tammy's next discussion, when we talk about waiver days, these districts we're talking about, Indian Hill, Wyoming, Kettering, all these places, a lot of these places up north, Centerville, if you look at their professional development that they have for teachers, incredible. The vast amount of professional development they have for teachers. That takes time. And that is where we have to look at it. It's like Noah, we're very similar to any other business. You have to invest in the employees if you want to get the return on your dollar in the marketplace. It's no different in education. So I hope you were finished as you're moving into waiver days.
Sure. Unless there are any other questions. I think just as I conclude, I think it's going to be more important that we begin to show you data that speaks to some of the things that Mr. Regano was sharing is some of the performance index and then getting down to the student level and looking at progress over time for individual students. I think that's going to be more valuable. And then the end result is my belief is that these scores will increase and rise just because of that.
Any other questions on that? Move on to item 10.6. Labor Day.
Yes. What I would like to do is propose 4 waiver days for next school year, and I guess I want to respectfully say, do you want me to read specifically what's on the proposal? What I did and what I've worked with others and looking at the district goals is to really define what specifically in our district goals that we need to address as kind of a core group of people who are leaders in the classroom. And in order to do that, and respectfully speaking, not necessarily reading from this page, we have a lot that we are working on. And to get our teachers and our staff to a place of being very focused and driven towards this common goal, which speaks to the proposal that was presented earlier, which speaks to the vision, which hopefully we get to that place, which speaks to the district goals, which ultimately makes its way to the classroom, which is most importantly the teachers and the students in the classroom. What the purpose of this request for these 4 days is that we have full attention and full definitive plans to address some of these areas that are very important to us. And that's through the OIP process, which the improvement process. We have put together our district leadership teams, our building leadership teams, and our teacher-based teams. And from that, and as we evolve through the remainder of this school year, one of the things that I think our goal is to try to assure ourselves that we are all on the same page as we move forward in some of the transitions that are taking place. Everything from response to intervention, which speaks to exactly what I was sharing with earlier. We want to respond from the data, from the information about individual students so that we can make decisions that are going to make a difference for their pathway through the college and career readiness. So the purpose of these 4 days is that we will have full attention of our teachers, with the leadership of all of us at central office, to the principals in the building, to lead our teachers and our teams within our buildings to define and to move forward with our data teams, with our response to intervention teams, which we clearly have that going as we speak. Mrs. Benson is heading up that charge with our response to intervention. And what's really critical in that is that we have a very large core group of teachers that are in the room, understanding soon-to-be coaches in the building to help facilitate that as we move forward. And we really truly believe that that's going to help us to really define what's going to be needed for, again, those individual students. So getting that framework and getting all of our teams in place so that we can move forward in the building is a strong initiative that takes time. One of the challenges is, for me and from what I understand is we need those teachers in the classroom, and we also need those teachers in planning to move forward. And it's really challenging to do that, and it's very costly at times. It costs us a lot of money to take them out of the classroom for any professional development. There's a large expense to that. And, one of the things that's, we're struggling with that right now with these days and the snow days and missing instruction. And my belief is that, our students deserve our full attention with the direction that we are going through our district goals and our vision and anything else that we do to move forward in technology, in this progress monitoring. Not all of our teachers are trained to do this progress monitoring. They need to understand, they need to know what's expected, to meet those targets and meet those expectations for students. So we need that very definitive, very focused time so that we can establish these core foundational systems, if you will, to assure that as we move forward, we can, the whole accountability is going to be there. And it's accountability from the leadership all the way down to students being accountable for some of their own learning. So there's all of those systems that need to be in place, and to get that full attention, we need that time with the teacher, that dedicated time to assure ourselves that we can move forward and build that vision and establish those expectations at a district level.
Well, I'd like to add, I mean, it's constant. We will get emails about data. Why are we not doing this? Why are we not doing that? Again, I go right back to, go look at the districts we're being compared to. They have the full day waivers, and or they literally build their schedule that way to where the kids are not there, so there can be focused attention on the task at hand and the professional development that needs to take place. If we have the mentality of, we're not gonna allow our teachers to be pulled out, they have to do it when the kids are there, or basically they're just never pulled out, we're never gonna grow. There's no profession around that says, if you're gonna get professional development, it's after work. If there is one, I'd like to know. They provide it during the day. The difference is in private businesses, they're not pulled away from kids during the day. So it goes back to, if we want to move forward, we have to invest the time in the people who are in front of the kids, so that they're more dynamic once they're there, so that we can get up to date on these things. The bottom line is the investment has not been in professional development. If you look at where investing has been in this district over the past 10 years, in textbook, just 3 years ago, they spent $56,000 a year and didn't even break $30,000 on professional development. There's been no investment in core instruction in the district. If we want to move this to where it needs to be, then we have to have the tools in place to be able to compete. We can't do both in the direction that we're going. These days are going to be very defined. They're not going to be days teachers are working in the classrooms, getting things prepared for the next day. They're going to be days that teachers are in session learning. They have to be spread out, because as teachers go and incorporate these plans, we collect that data. When they come back to the next meeting, we're able to see, here's where things went well, here's where things grow, here's where you need to go and adjust what you're teaching. And each time it's progressive. We can't just bunch them together at a time the kids aren't here. It's not going to work. It has to be real data so that we can show progress, so that the people who are in front of the kids change the methods that they're using, so that we can move forward into the 21st century more than we are now. And that's really the whole premise of why waiver days were put into place by the state. But they have made these very localized, like Mr. Regano's talking about, to where the board approves these days, up to 4 days. But again, for the districts that we're continually compared to, and I say this because I know it'll be broadcasted, please go and research those districts and how much money they're investing in professional development, how many people they have to do these. There is a 100% commitment into the core business of how those districts are run.
Questions? You said the board approves these, that it's a local decision?
Yes.
So that we're calling them waiver days. The state doesn't get to weigh in on this stuff, or?
No, not anymore.
That's
Well,
just
that's
been changed.
interesting. Now, would you say that these waiver days are the most important professional development that we need?
Oh, they'll take, the professional development's going to take place on these days.
I think when you talk about the most important, anything that is valuable is embedded work, and it's continued over time. It's not something that these 4 days, it's kind of that, you basically go, you have these 4 waiver days, and then things are not necessarily going to move forward, in light of this foundational component. There's still going to be that need to obviously provide professional development for our new teachers, for anyone that needs it, through the evaluation process. So it's not all-inclusive.
But these waiver days, as you described them, I mean, it's a strategic thing, right?
Very much.
Very much.
Probably more important than other things that we might do on a routine basis. Is
I
that
believe
fair?
so, yes.
So, and I really don't want to see the students' time lost either. But we have these 2-hour-a-month things, right?
One.
Happens every month, 9 months out of the school year. That amounts to 3 days. I mean, can we reclaim those 2 hours and put these waiver days in? And then, you know, we might give up a small amount of student time, but we would be reclaiming it. That would be much more palatable to me than.
You mean the late start?
Late start?
Yeah, the late start, yeah. Because, you know, when would these start? I'm sorry, my battery died, so I'm working on a blank screen. Are these this
Next
school year?
Next
It's next
school year.
school year. So, okay. That would be an approach that I think rather than have just more days off, and if we could make up that time by taking out those late starts, that'd make it a lot more palatable for me. Because I really, I mean, kids aren't learning if they're not in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Although we can do blizzard bags, right? But they're gonna learn more when they're in the classroom. So if we can reclaim that time and kind of make it a swap, I think that I would prefer to do that.
So I guess what I heard is that concentrated time and some methodical approach is a good strategy. Cool. And I think what Jim was asking, is there another strategy that you overlap into that gives it a double? I mean, I've been saying for 2 years, I think I've been asking about, I think we put professional development in. I think you guys asked for professional development. I think though, if I'm not mistaken, the process you've been going through is trying to figure out how to implement and move these things into a plan, which is what I believe I'm hearing tonight is being talked about. So I'm all for that direction. I'm also all for not having children miss hours of teaching with teachers, because I think that's what we're here for, is to make sure education's going.
So, I mean, the point, you make a good point. This year with OTES, everything that had to be put into place all at once, and I've expressed my discontent with OTES to some extent, the time that it takes. We had to pull teachers out of class in groups and get substitutes. Being able to do these waiver days will save an easy $100,000, because we're going to stop pulling teachers out of classrooms with subs once we have these days. That will be taking place on these days. That's why with the district goals, when we narrow those down on these days, we are going to have specifics. Right now, there's days that we've had to pull, Ms. Vincent, you might be able to talk about this more, up to 39 teachers out at once. Because by the end of this year, we have to have all these things into place based on state mandates. Because we did not have waiver days to where we could have said, we have one full day, all the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers to that building, all the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers to that building. All of you are going to do SLOs on this day, and by the end of this day, here's going to be the product that's due. We couldn't do it that way. We had to pull all these people. And as a result, we had a lot of parents calling us saying, why in the world, we're paying this teacher to be in the classroom, not the sub that's in there every other week, because you have to get this state mandate done. It's things like that that are going to be able to stop if we're able to have waiver days, to be able to get everything together at once instead of all this segmented middle piece setup that we have to try to work through right now.
Well, it gives them dedicated time to hear the same message.
Yes, it does.
From not only from the district level, but also from the building level. And so that message is consistent, and that dialogue is articulated within their organization, their building.
So you're asking us to add days to not limit the amount of teaching minutes that we deliver, but add more time, or will
So
this?
these will take place of
Existing days.
So we're technically then possibly reducing the amount of.
We're doing that either way though, David. Here's the thing about it is, we're gonna do it either way. We have things we have to accomplish by the state. I don't know how else to say this, but we're gonna pull the teachers one way or the other. We have to get these things done.
You're probably misinterpreting where I'm heading with my question, or at least it feels like you are. So I'm not objecting to the calamity days. I'm trying to just figure out how we make sure that if that's 8, 16, 27 times 4, 28 hours of teaching, how do we make up the 28 hours of teaching for kids? And if it's not a problem, then I'm okay hearing that too.
Right.
Because I'm not against, so there's nothing, I'm for it. So there's one, so we can go in that direction, and just trying to figure out how we keep the education going. That's all.
This is gonna be a far out there statement, and I hope you'll think about this. If we don't invest, we're gonna lose 28 hours of education with kids, but we're gonna gain in the next 28 hours because our teachers are gonna be that much better prepared.
I understand that. I understand
And
that.
if we don't invest into our teachers, we're gonna get the same result across the board. The only way we can do this is to use this is why waivers days were done. We have to invest in our staff, so that next 28 hours is gonna be that much better.
So you don't think it's worth investing an additional 28 hours in teaching and professional development? I guess that's where I'm heading. I'm doubling down on the investment as well, asking. In other words, 4 extra days of life in buildings,
Mhm.
which means kids get their time and teachers get their time, which we need both to have, I agree. So that's, I'm a double down guy here.
Well, it sounds as if you're basically saying that we add 4 days to the calendar.
I think so,
if
kind
you
of.
will, the teaching calendar.
Maybe, I don't know. I think that's what I said, right? Yep.
Yeah. In a roundabout
I don't know what I
way,
just
think that's
said.
what you're saying.
I don't know what I just spent in that question, but I'm not really concerned about that in this particular conversation. That's not the conversation I'm having about money. I'm having about education and professional development.
And
Maybe that's a conversation we need to have in the future. Right now, we don't have the option to add the days to the calendar.
Is that like an MOU thing that you can kind of vote on
Yes,
and
it
go
would.
talk to somebody and somebody can give you that power to go do it and have one for 4 days?
I mean, and I don't want to leave this conversation of, we're blaming this on a union or.
I wasn't blaming anything, no.
I'm not saying you are. I just know I've learned how things are gonna just rapidly spin, that instead of, the 4 waiver days, we need to add days and blame it on the teacher. This is not about blaming it on anybody.
No, I'm asking.
We're trying to increase academics within
Yeah.
the parameters that we have.
Yes.
And this is the option that we have to do that. If we choose not to do that, based on these power struggles we have as adults, the only people losing are the kids.
I think Mr. Petroni's point is maybe offering maybe an option that takes you out of the box that you were in, working within the existing parameters. And, it might cost us some money, but maybe we do add 4 days.
And
so
pay
that-
people for
so
4
that-
days?
That's doubling down. That's what I was asking.
I mean, we're
That's
paying
something we
subs.
could look at, but.
You said you wanted
We're
professional
paying
development.
subs now, right? Is what you said?
Yeah, but
So
that's $85 to $100 a day. That's not a teacher's salary.
maybe we could work it out where, we pay the subs rate. I don't know.
No, I'm just trying to figure out.
You don't want to get.
No, I'm not even, I'm just wanting to know if we can give the children as much time as they deserve and we can invest in professional development. And if you want to invest in professional development, could you come back maybe with a number at the next meeting? I'm okay with the calamity days personally. I just want to know if there's even the will of our professional teachers that would be interested in doing this. Obviously, it's not just us asking, they have to want to do this, but there's a cost associated with it, which somebody has to do the math on that for, 28 hours of professional development and that might not be acceptable. That's okay too. I'm just asking.
Well, I guess I would like to say that, the next time that we meet, that we propose some additional options based on what you're asking. But to just go back to the initial, proposal to waive days is really what the proposal was.
I know.
Actually. And waiving those days simply means, not simply, but what it means is that obviously the students are not coming to school that particular day, and teachers are working in a dedicated sense to achieve some of these expectations, building these foundations through the Ohio improvement process, and assuring ourselves that everyone is on the same page as we move forward in this world of accountability. And ultimately, I think we're all sitting in this room because we're concerned with, all of these things that we're challenged by. But the fact of the matter is we're trying to move forward, and we're trying to move forward with a dedicated effort to assure ourselves and believe that having all those teachers in that same, light of what's expected will allow us to move forward, and not be challenged by, I didn't hear this, I didn't hear that, and and you did. You heard it, here's where we're going.
Well, this
And I
just
think it's a
isn't
work.
teachers. We have a whole classified staff that look at it as well, so. I mean, this is everyone that's supposed to work on that. When these days are waived, we have professional development for every area.
I'm just saying that I'm okay with the plan. It sounds great. Is there another option that we can accomplish it and have kids in class that is amicable or even workable or even feasible or even wantable? And if there isn't, then I'm cool. I like the plan. I've always been for professional development. I'm glad you finally brought something forward. And I appreciate bringing it forward. So hopefully.
Well, I think there's always going to be there's a cost to everything.
Sure.
And there's a cost when kids aren't here on those days. But there's going to be a gain when the teachers are back in the classroom. So
we're in our budget. I'm sorry.
Right. Instead of, I mean, with 700 employees or 600, however many we have, to add 4 days, I think that cost would be greater than the kids not being there for those 4 days.
Just trying to get the best investment for everybody, and we have budget time right now, so there's an opportunity to look at some reasonableness of that and see if it fits into the framework of where we're at between now and May.
And again, this comes down to just what Mr. Steck talked about with Commissioner Vision. From a leader standpoint, we don't have to have these discussions. We can have these board meetings over an hour. We just don't bring these things. We keep it the way it's always been. We don't have any this year. We didn't have any the year before. It's easy to maintain mediocrity. But if we're going to break that ground, it takes leadership to make that happen. And it's going to be different. We have to do some things different if we want to yield the results that we're seeing in these other districts that keep being compared to us.
Is everybody okay with having them look into this maybe to see if it's working?
I think what I've heard is there's a across the board support of teacher development. And there's also across the board support of 4 days of instruction for kids. So knowing sometimes you can't have everything, but it's nice to hear that there's consensus. And I didn't hear that money was an object.
It's an object to me.
Well, I'm just telling you.
Maybe there's
You're never going to hear me say that we can just,
maybe
we
there's
have
a
all
middle.
this money.
Well, maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe there's a middle
ground.
ground. Again, I'm just asking for ideas to
Right.
accomplish your goal. And that's it.
Well, we can do that. Tara told me, tell me how much we spend in 1 day on salaries. So why
One
not?
question, so if the waiver days are enacted, then you'll still have the late start? Is that?
Well, I mean, we could consider that. That's because I will tell you,
As
there
of
are.
now.
Right, I mean, it is an inconvenience for parents to find a babysitter for 2 hours when they have to be at work. I understand that.
I agree with that.
Yep. So, I mean, we could look at that.
And maybe that's the middle
That
ground.
would give us back
Maybe
some-
that's the middle ground because we could absorb, we could offer instruction for the 2 hours and then maybe that's less days that
Right.
we would have to pay out.
Correct.
So maybe there's some combination.
I mean, again, it's all of us working together and there's always compromise, but the end result is what we gain for the kids. Yeah, we have to look at that.
No?
Sure.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you. Item 10.7, Mr. Pennell again. Don't be quick.
I'm going to be quick. I just wanted to give you all an update. Our copier contract expires in January of 2015, but the copier's retired. They're old. They don't work very well. They don't have a lot of uptime right now, or they have uptime, but it's down way too much. So my intent is to put out the RFQ next week with it due back to me by the 17th and approval sometime end of April or beginning of May from the board because it is a substantial contract that's multiple years, needs to come before the board for approval. The intent would be a July installation, which would give us plenty of time to get training done and things before schools in, make sure everything works and before school, where the teachers come back and they have, the big rush at the beginning of the year. In talking with many of the teachers, I won't say, we haven't talked about all of them, but, basically, we need more speed, we need more uptime. They want more copiers, they want hole punch, they want booklet makers, they want, saddle stitchers, things like that. So, color. So we're working on all those things. The intent is that we get a solution that saves us money, but gives us more and better quality equipment. The equipment that's there is less than desirable at this point.
And it'll be in the contract that they won't break down during exam time?
Well, I wish, if we could do that, I think we could make $1 billion. We should develop that ourselves, but the intent is, though, if we get more equipment in, if they break down, it's not gonna be as hindering as it is right now. Because, one of the problems we had at Dennis was they had that big honking machine. It was a 100-page minute machine, which was a nice machine. But when it went down, all you had left was a 30-page minute machine in the office and 2 50-page per minute machines upstairs for a 1,000-student school. Not enough. So we made them swap those out and put 2 90-page per minute machines down there, which it helped a little bit. They're still down quite a bit, but rarely are both of them down the same. It happens, but we're in a little better shape.
I had a great experience of copying about 10,000 copies this last week, getting some proposals out, and our copier burned up twice. And it was a new copier.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it was Brandon.
You can let me know which brand is. Not on record, later. Not now.
Thank you for that advice. I'm listening. I guess I was remembering a presentation that our IT specialist in the back made about something to start moving away from paper or reducing paper or something. I don't know if that's humanly possible in education. I know I don't use paper anymore, but it's kind of a tough transition. Is that I'm not saying don't get the copiers. I'm not saying, there'll be a lease, I assume, within this program, cost per page, all this like that. Is that part of your vision?
Well, I will tell you, and that was one of the things we noticed over the last 3 days while we were in Alabama. Wow, you do not see much paper. Even the way that the central office is managed, and I know Tara is already talking with different companies. We still have all hardback folders and file folders, so everything's paper. Hardly anything's electronic. So yeah, there's a lot of things we have to look at.
Yeah,
We'd like less paper too.
I mean, just sending emails with newsletters saves each time almost 6,000 pieces of paper for every time we send one. So technology, as long as it doesn't tear up.
That's right.
I was gonna ask the same, funny when you said that, because I was thinking, we e-bridge everything into the cloud.
Right.
I never thought there'd be a day when we don't have paper. So I was just wondering, when you're talking about copier and how many copies a minute, if that's not something that we need to look at. And I'm like, David, I'm not saying don't get a copier, but
Right now, the district's printing about $1.2 million or 1.2 million copies a month. A month.
And that's where when technology comes into play.
We're doing $1.2 million or 12 million copies a year.
When kids are able to do math problems online, literally scribing on the iPad itself, it goes into a data system, calculates the data at night. Parents can literally go in and pull up the assignments. Every single assignment will have done in class that day and be able to look at the questions they got right or didn't get right. That's how advanced things can be. We don't even need a progress book with that. Parents can just go and see exactly what was done in the class. But then what's going to happen is you're going to have parents comparing. Well, in this class, they did this lesson, this lesson, this lesson, and this class, they only did 3 of them. It is, you want to talk transparent. Technology creates transparency in academics like no other. That blew me away to how that works.
It's always good to get a foundation to start building off of, obviously. I guess, yeah, go forth. I just would echo that we need to go find a strategy to implement a plan for paperless.
What we're working on.
Okay.
Can I say something on that?
Yeah.
When we talk about printing, we talk about 2 things. We talk about printing off a copier. We talk about printing off of network printers. Okay. So when we look at total page count, it's both of those things together. Students print to network printers primarily. Staff members print to copiers. Our printer model with our network printers is down about 3/4. So the amount that our students are sending print jobs to our printers is down about 75%. Just in one lab in this building, our digital media lab, we're down $6,000 in consumable cost for 1 year because of Google Apps and the way that we're turning in assignments electronically. That's half the battle. The other half of the battle is getting staff members to stop printing and start sharing out. See, they're really good at receiving information electronically, but we're not to the point where we're sending out a lot of information to the students electronically. It's mostly one way today. But it's the right step, right? We decided this was a pilot year for Google Apps for education. We're now seeing almost 1,200 Chromebooks in the district. Not all district owned. A lot of our students are bringing them in. But we have about 1,200 Chromebooks walking around our halls, okay? So this is a tremendous step in it's almost impossible to say paperless education, right? At least today, that's impossible. Some things have to be printed, especially at the younger grades and, whatever. But we're tremendously farther than we were last year. I mean, by 75%.
I hope my question was more that I knew we were heading somewhere. It wasn't to be any defensiveness. It was more like, okay.
No, it's a compliment.
And the other piece,
Okay.
the other piece about these too is they'll have, the current ones have this capability, but they're not set up for the most part. One of the things is that all of these will be set up to scan back not only to email, but to folders and to sites, so that, because for all this testing that we're doing, a lot of it now is scored automatically. And so we need things, ability to scan them in quickly, and these copiers have fast scan capability. The bigger ones they scan two sides at the same time. So they'll be scanned in, they'll be sent to the a network drive somewhere, and then uploaded to a scoring site and then on. So this is another step in trying to prevent some of this other paper that needs to be done, needs to be sent off and things like that.
I don't know if the scanner will come with color capabilities of the
Yeah.
scan. So, okay, cool.
All of them come as a
Okay, anything else? Okay. Item 10.8, public participation on the work session agenda. Anybody have public participation?
I don't dare.
Yes.
Yeah, and your name and address, please.
My name is Barb Lane, and I live at 5599 West Springway. Been a resident, actually Mr. Stoogie was teaching when I was in school. That tells both of our ages. Actually, the information about the church donation, the information we got in church was different than what was presented here today. So I know that wasn't discussed here, but I just wanted to make a point of that because I got different information at church. This business plan is beautiful for this session of getting the community involvement. I think it's kind of extensive for what it's trying to generate, and trying to make it more complicated what education, what the people of the community want as far as the best education for their kids. My kids just graduated from here. The community, I'm not exactly sure what, even from listening tonight, what it is that the school's business is, other than to educate the children to the best ability that they can achieve. So, that's just my opinion, and, thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Kelly Coles, 7141 Cornwall Drive. And I just wanted to remind you that when you talk about professional development, I think everybody would agree that that's important, and it's right up there in the priority list. But in the private sector, people get their professional development on their own time, on their free time. Oh, absolutely. You looked at me like I was from outer space. Most people I know that have a salaried job have to do professional development. And if they can't fit it in their day, they do it after hours. My husband does it all the time. He's studying on his days off. He studies after work. He takes exams, all sitting at our house. He does all of his work that way because that's how private sectors work. They don't do 7.25-hour work days for a salary. So what they do is they make up for what they need to know to do their job. They do it. They find it out and they do that job. But to take the professional development time off the backs of the children and the amount of learning that they need to accomplish in a year, I don't think is the right move. So I think you're talking some kind of compromise, and that would work, but I'm telling you that I don't think most people out there who are in the private sector will understand educating for 4 less days and substituting it for professional development when there are 3 months of the summer available for professional development. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any comments? 10.9, discussion of other business. Other business?
I'm pretty worn out.
Yeah, no.
Somebody just kept talking and talking and talking, but just one thing. We're under these heat lamps up here, and we I don't know if anybody else has had, I've heard about it. But we used to do these work sessions in the library. It was a lot more comfortable. I just asked the board to consider it. End of statement.
But then Matt would have to go to all that work. The only thing I have is, I think, 7 o'clock to almost 11 o'clock. So I'd be happy to take any ideas, thoughts, and I thought it was a great sharing of information. But my experience is after 2 hours, we lose people, including ourselves. So if there's any suggestions or ideas, any other board members have regarding keeping this in a tighter time frame, I'd be open to it.
We have an executive session tonight, Tim?
Yeah. So with that, 11.1, we'll move to executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official. Second. Roll. Yes, roll call. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.